Right, we are back. It's another Monday. Carlo's returned. Look, it's nice. It's Carlo over there.
Look who's back. Look out, everybody. I'm not
Uh,
feeling at all, not at all feeling emasculated by the fact that everybody felt that they needed to comment on how much bigger, stronger, better looking, and everything Vlad was than me. So, I'm feeling great about that part.
yeah, I'm
Thanks,
not gonna
guys.
lie. I loved Vlad on last week. He was much better than you, and yeah, he was nicer to look at when I'm looking at the stream. So yeah, uh, um, we're also joined today, in case you hadn't read the description, in case you don't know why you're here, by friend of the channel, obviously George. How you doing, George?
Very good, guys. Thank you very much for having me. It was nice seeing Vlad on last week. Actually, I'm bringing the big and the beard, but not the accent. I'm afraid. So
Vlad
Carlo can
literally
feel
is.
slightly more emasculated by my presence as well.
He really
Always.
is the full package, Vlad. No one can stand up to his sheer might. But no. Okay then. So we're here to talk about the TSL. We're straight into tournaments. There is news and things we're going to cover. Myself and Carlo will stay on and cover that at the end. But obviously George might want to get himself away. But it's the TSL. It is the TSL, and all the divisions are now in. The games are locked in. The matches are locked in. We're now just in the case of arranging them and, of course, playing them out. So we're entering week one. A couple of games have actually already been played, and which is incredible for starters. But we'll dive into, I guess, the stats, and should we start at Division 4 or Division 1? Where do you want to start? Top or bottom?
Look, let's start with Division 1. I would normally say let's start with Division 4, but there has been a slight few problems with Division 4 today, so we'll get to them. I'm excited about Division 4, but there has been a couple of issues with it today that we've been working through. So I want to point out as well, guys, it's been like a year since we did this last. Like it's been
It has.
genuinely. I started the first season of the TSL was like August last year.
Mhm.
I know it went on forever, but like it has been a long, long time. It's been a long time since we've had TSL to talk about.
It actually
Absolutely.
has. It's been forever. Um,
Hmm.
I can't say it's not felt like a long time as well, because I mean,
It
how
really
much of
has.
that year was waiting for 2021?
Yeah, it's
The
been
majority.
it's been a long time since we had anything to talk about other than when's it going to come? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
it's really good to just like get actually into the meat of the edition, like the really start to hash things out and see where things end up.
I'm
Definitely.
glad we're kicking it off this way as well. I'm glad that the TSL is the first tournament that's being run. Like
Mhm.
it's big. There's lots of teams. There's there's like hyper competitive teams. There's newer, more casual teams. I think it's a great way of kicking it off. I'm really, really glad that we managed to get it sorted.
Definitely. Um, and as Sunday says there, what a goddamn year it's been. Hello to Florian. I'm gonna butcher that name. Athem. I can't pronounce Russian. And West Coast Bannerman as well in chat. So we're going to start off. We'll start off with the faction breakdowns. Now, it's worth remembering, guys, in case you aren't aware of the TSL. TSL is in each division this year. We've got 6 teams. Across the 6 teams, they have 4 players on each team, so that goes as 24 players in each division. And in each team, they aren't allowed to pick the same faction more than once. So you'll see a bigger faction spread than you perhaps might normally see. And that's what we'll start ourselves off with. We see of the 6 teams in Division
Can I
1.
just jump in? Can
Yeah,
I
go
jump
on.
in with a question?
Yep.
George, why
Mm.
the TSL is very close to the Simon tournament document, but why specifically did so obviously the first TSL came out, you pretty much put that format together.
Yeah.
And then Simon came along with this is what we believe a team tournament document looks like. But you chose not to actually implement that. Is there any particular reasons why? Is there anything you don't like about it? Why did you not specifically implement the team doc in terms of no repeat of neutral characters and that kind of stuff?
So obviously, as you said, like before the team document was a thing, and like I haven't really looked at it since not that long after it came out. When I was planning season 2, which was originally going to get started kind of early December, and then obviously we had the consensus vote from the captains and the teams that they wanted to delay because we then started seeing Visions in the Flames, and we had the consensus decision that we wanted to delay until until 2021 was released, and obviously no one expected it to be quite as long as it was. But like, so I haven't genuinely, yeah, Carl, you did. Not all of us expected it to be quite as long. But yeah, so I haven't, honestly, I haven't looked at the team document since then. I looked at it in quite a lot of detail at the time because I was talking about what to implement and what not to. And I think I would have partly I was really, really happy with how the TSL ran in season one. I was overall, obviously things have been tweaked. We've made the season shorter. We've got more divisions. I think that was an important kind of quality of life thing. But the core idea of having these 4 teams, of leaving list building as unrestricted as possible within these preset parameters, I think ended up working really well. 1.6 was obviously a different beast than 2021 is because you very much had those like so many lists bringing Walder and Varys, multiple teams normally having every player bringing both of those NCUs, or certainly one of them. For season 2, I was really, really excited about the idea that the TSL was going to be the first tournament under the 2021 rule set. And so I wanted to put even fewer restrictions on it because I want to see how people are actively trying to work out what the meta is. In the process of the tournament. I mean, we've had 1.6, we've had 2021 now for like a month today, right? The full package dropped a month ago today. First games have already started. List building was locked last week. I wanted this to be a kind of baptism by fire for 2021, so I didn't want to start restricting neutral characters per to one, just to no repeats. Plus, I don't think they're as oppressive as they were. I mean, Littlefinger has seen a big rise. Like a lot of lists are bringing Littlefinger, especially Baratheon lists bringing Littlefinger. I've been bringing Littlefinger in all of my Baratheon lists so far. But we're not seeing. I have not seen as much Varys. I've not seen as much Walder. No doubt Mickey's going to be able to point out how many times both of those characters come up. But I don't think it's. Yeah, my hunch would be that it's nowhere near as prevalent as it was before, with basically every player across 18 teams bringing multiple copies. So yeah, I it's not that I don't like the team document.
In my really blunt way, do you not think? Do you think that the Simon team tournament document is not fit for purpose?
I'd have to take a closer, more recent look at it. Honestly, like I said, I haven't looked at it since December. I'm kind of shaky on the details. For me, it was a case of most of the 18 teams have returned. Those people are used to this format. A lot of the people that are new to teams are used to the old format through watching and following along. I didn't feel the need to fix what wasn't broken, if that makes sense. It's like not a reflection on the team document at all, but more a reflection on how strong I think the first season of the TSL was. That's literally it.
I think that's fair enough. And to be honest, I think in the nicest possible sense, I think a lot of us, we even took apart the team tournament document, Carlo, didn't we? And said that there was actually some problems with it. I mean,
I ask because I don't think it's fit for purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, like I said, I just haven't looked at. Like I don't see myself running necessarily a big team tournament in person. I'd like to, don't get me wrong. I'd like to emulate the TSL over a weekend at a big event one time. That would be great. But I do say there I would like to run the TSL as a thing. And so like I'm comfortable with the system that I came up with. This was before the team tournament document existed. So like I said, it's no reflection on that, but like the system I came up with came first. It has, I think now, especially with the captains and the pairings, has more in common with some of the other wargame team tournaments like ETC and Guild Ball, stuff like that. So yeah, it's just a case of I'm not really familiar enough with it to properly comment, but I'm really happy with how the TSL ran. So
yeah,
sure,
cool. So then, faction breakdowns. To nobody's surprise, I think ever, we see 6 Lannisters and 6 Targaryens. To everyone's slight surprise, only 5 Night's Watch, 1 Free Folk, and 3 Stark and 3 Baratheon. 0 Neutral and 0 Greyjoy. Just a quick comment on what we think about that breakdown there.
For me, I think it makes sense. You know, last time when we in TSL season 1, we spoke about. I kept mentioning the Power 4, which at the time was Target. Well, not Target. What am I saying? Not Targaryen. It was Free Folk, Stark.
Baratheon, wasn't it?
Baratheons were in, Baratheons were included, and Night's Watch were included in that Power 4. And that was what we saw most common across that list. But now that Power 4 has definitely become a Power 3 with like what I would call a bubble fourth choice. And that fourth choice, in my mind, is Baratheons. Other people seem to think it's Starks. That's kind of for each player to decide. But obviously, as a Baratheon player, that's my fourth choice. But it doesn't surprise me to see Lannister, Night's Watch, and Targaryens as easily the biggest three there.
It is, I'll point out for those of you who aren't aware, the one team that didn't take Night's Watch took Free Folk instead, and it was actually not a protest choice, but they literally said they didn't want to take Night's Watch because none of them play it, and they just wanted to play factions they enjoyed.
They also bought Greyjoys as well, we should add. That was...
They originally didn't they? But then, didn't they change it? Because this is Division 1.
I don't... Let me have a look. So it should be...
There's no Greyjoys in Division 1, I don't believe.
Well, I'll let you carry on talking about that because it's the three-eyed roosters. I was certain they'd bought Greyjoys, but you go for it. I'll jump back in a second.
I think
Carlo, go on.
A lot of people have been talking about the fact that maybe Lannisters aren't what people thought they were, and I am super interested to find out how the Lannisters do. You know, like I think that the Lannisters are the gatekeepers. They are holding back a lot of the factions. But I do think that they are really, really struggling to break the Night's Watch Targaryen matchup. Yeah. And so we'll see how that goes across the tournament because, you know, like you can see that, you know, outside of the couple of times, half of your games as a Lannister player, roughly speaking, I don't know exactly how all the pairings went, but half of your games are going to be into Night's Watch and Targaryens. So it may end up with them taking quite a few losses if they haven't brought some really specific tech. I just last week played in Liverpool and I played against Mother of Dragons and it did not feel great as a Lannister. You know, like it's Mother of Dragons isn't a great matchup and I really don't think Offal is a great matchup either. So super interested to see just if the Lannisters can hack it and if I particularly, you know, like overestimated what I think that they can do.
I think you're right there. I think a lot of us saw Lannisters and saw just how much damage they can do with that panic build. And I think at the time, rightly on paper, we were like, wow, these are going to be really good. And I think in practice, so for me as a Baratheon player, I found Lannisters actually quite easy to get around by bringing specific builds. So like Stannis, One True King, is great for getting around Lannisters. And you're right, Night's Watch don't really care about it. Targaryens certainly don't care about it either, with, you know, just both of those looking at an average of 4 and 5 morale. Like you just don't care. So I think you're right, is that Lannisters are maybe actually keeping other factions down and giving other factions less room to maybe challenge the Night's Watch.
Okay, cool. I agree fully, by the way. I'd be interested to see the Starks and Baratheons and how they kind of pair up, though, as two kind of like underdogs. For what it's worth, Starks and Baratheons are actually the two lowest rated factions on some of Ice and Fire stats. You've got this really weird parity of the believed top 3 and then the bottom 2 being the most common, which is really weird, but also I think going to be quite interesting. Should we dive into commanders then for Division 1?
Let's have a look.
Let's have a little look. So, the commander with the most picks, if you were to take a guess.
Othel.
Of a total possible 10 picks, Othel appears 8 times.
What surprises me there is that it's not 10. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, but again, I say that people love Jon, and Jon is also very good. It doesn't surprise me that people are not just doubling up. I mean, most people have doubled up on him, right? That's the point.
Yeah, of the 5 players, 3 of them would have doubled up. I know I'm one of the players that didn't. I've taken a John Lish because I never believe that running the same commander twice, even though in a competitive format can be good, I never believe it's the best option you've got.
Yeah, agreed.
Can we have a he's not awful counter going? Anybody? Somebody?
He's not awful counter. We'll get there, I think, towards the end of the day when we look at the
he's
final
all right,
edition stuff.
but he's not awful. The big boogeyman of the edition is so blatantly obvious. I think
I think the irony of it as well. The irony of it for me was I was more concerned about his NCU. I didn't properly pay attention to his commander at first, and I saw his NCU, orbital striking people, and thought, oh, that might be a bit close to the bone there. But it's just his commander is so good. Why would you ever bring his NCU? Which is often the other way around, right? Is that like Gior, for example, I really rate Gior commander, but his NCU is so incredible that why would you bring his commander? Othel was the other way around. That his NCU is great, but his commander is too dominant. It's too good.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Too much stacking power that just lets you become more and more and more oppressive as the game goes on.
Yeah.
We'll see when we look at the NCUs, obviously, probably overall, but we'll he's not awful count equals 1, thanks, Charles. We'll look at the NCU count and we'll see of the 10 possible lists, of course, 8 of them can't run awful NCU. So we'll see how many of the remaining 2 do. I'll give you a clue. You don't need one. You can probably work it out. So we see Khal Drogo coming up 6 times. I don't believe anyone ever ran him twice. Remembering off the top of my head for Division 1. But 6 picks, so everyone believing that Khal Drogo is a good commander for Targaryens, which...
Great. He's straight up great. I've got no argument with that whatsoever. He's my go-to choice for Targaryen. He's been my go-to choice Targaryen commander. I think he's phenomenal. I think in a primarily unsullied... I take him in a primarily unsullied heavy list with him in veterans. And it's beautiful. He's so dangerous. He's so dangerous.
Absolute sacrilege.
Yeah. I got called out for putting Gregor, for putting Sandor Clegane into Pyros, and you've just attached a character who was dead before the other unit ever even existed together into an army list. That'll make Leet Teddy the Lawmaster turn in his grave, I'm sure.
So we see so Khal Drogo, apparently Groose reminding me Masara did run him twice. I apologise. That's me clearly not refreshing my head on the data well enough. Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, and I think actually this is true for Drogo and Gregor. 1.6 kind of like flying under the radar. They were always picked, but they never seemed to do very well. People couldn't get them to work in the meta. Now they're getting picked, and it seems like people are getting them to work, which is nice. They're 2 very popular commanders before 2021. Seem like 2 very popular commanders afterwards. Very aggressive commanders as well in both Drogo and Gregor. Do you think this is a somewhat answer to people thinking, you know what? If we kill Night's Watch, maybe we don't have to deal with them as much? I don't know. What do you think?
That's people believing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll go out on a limb and say it won't happen. So I think Gregor and to a... Drogo's better. I kind of respect the Drogo pick. I think he's quite a good commander, though I do think there are some quite interesting ones. Especially if you think that Mother of Dragons, I would have assumed that MOD was going to be more popular, but I guess a lot of people are scared to play it into the Othel matchup, think that that's a really bad matchup for them. Mm-hmm. So I think that Jorah and stuff like that are bringing a lot of interesting stuff to Targaryens too. So I was surprised that Drogo was so popular, but Gregor, I'm not super surprised he's popular. But I don't think it's this classic thing. I don't think people will be as successful with him as they think. When you play at a mid-ish level into not fully optimized lists, people not really, really concentrating, playing absolutely as well as possible, aggression does really, really well. And I think that when they start to meet really control pieces like Othel, like other Lannister builds, that Gregor will start to come apart. We'll see whether or not Drogo has the tools to not come apart as an aggressive commander. But I think that Gregor will fall a bit flat. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think Drogo won't suffer from it as much because you have certain, well, I mean, it's anecdotal, but the list that I've been running him in, like I said, are kind of unsullied heavy with him just kind of roving around on the edge. So the rest of the list isn't as aggressive as his unit is. So his unit of veterans paired with Jorah the Explorer, absolutely great. You know, a lot of people were worried about this early on. I think, and people have now discovered there are other things to be more worried about. But like having that as an aggressive package, and then actually having your Unsullied capturing objectives, doing some killing where they need to, because they even the pikemen. I've said this in the faction overview on 3 Sales, like the Unsullied pikemen, I think are straight up killers. They're really, really good, and they're super hard to shift. But you've got both sides of that. So, but it strikes me that Gregor wants to be in a just aggressive list. And I think, Carlo, I think you're right, is that can quite quickly come undone. Whereas the Drogo one, you have more space for different builds that can shore up his aggression in other places.
WOP, current world number 1, as measured by Songwriter Fire Stats, saying that Gregor is the top 3, but he reckons it's a gatekeeping build. Saying it's great against everything except Mother of Dragons and Offal. So we'll see if that plays out, I guess.
Gregor and Red Cloaks is the nastiest thing going, but it just falls flat against Targs and Offal. So you're going to face a lot of that. So I think that he's just going to come a bit undone.
Carlo, I wanted to bring up something you said there, actually. People talking about Mother of Dragons into Othel and people maybe being a little bit freaked out by that. Obviously, in my privileged position as league commissioner, I have access to everyone's team rooms. So I can see that most teams, not all teams, but most teams use these rooms for their list building discussions. And obviously, I'm not going to reveal anyone's like secret hidden information or whatever. But a lot of teams were planning to have their Targaryen players go up against opponents' Night's Watch players, thinking that is the way around it.
Yep.
So, I think it's going to be interesting to see that play out, because I think a lot of the pairings have gone that way. If they're not Night's Watch mirrors, it does tend to be Targaryen into Night's Watch.
Absolutely. I would agree. You know, as we talk about, we got Night's Watch, Offal, we got Targaryens, and then we've got the Lannisters, who are also considered powerful but aren't good into those two matchups. So the question just is do you want to take a mirror matchup, or do you think that Targs have the tools to take on Offal, in which case, you know, most people are relatively comfortable in the idea that dragons isn't the way to do that. And then you're basically left with the other choice is, do we just throw somebody out at the Night's Watch and just kind of, you know, it's bad to say, but like take the loss. I mean,
that is a lot of the way people are talking about it. I mean, we've had a couple of results in already. Division 2 results came in last night. We had both of them involved the Night's Watch. One was Lord Commander Bob, who I think is in the chat, up against Markarius Vex. That's Bralor Faithful versus Off the Wall Brawlers. Bob got the win. We also had another
game,
night.
By the way, I watched Bob's game against Macarius, and like he put up a nice fight with the Lannisters. There wasn't any game there. To be honest,
I spoke to Mark about it. I spoke to Mark about it this morning, and he said that he was just like, we were prepared to take the loss there. But what was interesting was Lightning Lords versus Steadfast ORJ. We had Greyjoys going up against, so Jazzman and the Greyjoys going up against Mahoney's Law and Night's Watch, and Jazzman actually got the 11-10 win.
He did.
Which I thought that's a big scalp. That's because Mahoney is a great player. Not to say the Jazzman isn't, but Mahoney is a great player. I know, because I've played him a number of times. And bringing the most powerful faction, bringing an Othel list, and losing out to Greyjoys, which is not one you'd expect them to be losing out against, I think.
Yeah, he did even say it though. He said a strategy that I talked about with Stannis. You just take enough bodies, take enough wounds that the Night's Watch can't kill them all, and hope that it works. And hey, it worked, and I can't blame Jazzman for doing it. You know, a strategy that doesn't work often, but that can get you a win against a good faction and a good player.
Yeah, and Jazz said 9 out of 10 times he loses that match, but when he got the 1 out of 10 when it counted, so
all that matters.
Yeah.
We're gonna look at the units now then, so let's see what the most common unit is, and I think to literally nobody's surprise, we have Poor Fellows coming in at 21 picks. across Division 1. Conscripts at 17, just behind. But, I mean, they're 4-point units, right? We talked about the impact of 4-point units in list building. 10 7-point lists build a crossbowmen. Red Cloaks are up there. And then I
think people have finally got on board with the idea that activations win games. You know, like...
And more than that as well. More than that as well. With both of these, with Lannisters and Night's Watch, these are units that, like, they're tar pit units. The conscripts fulfill a role of just throwing out wounds back to your crossbows, and the poor fellows, like, I saw a lot of people discussing it on the way in. Is, or how do you survive against Night's Watch? Well, you just bring poor fellows and nothing else, and just hope you can outlive them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me to see that update. What does surprise me is seeing the Dragonstone Noble there coming in at 8 choices.
Yeah. Popular pick from the 3
again,
Baratheon
like
players.
4-point activation, like it's the only one that Baratheons have access to, but it's, you know, that's 3 wounds versus 12 from the other 2. So
the actual interesting thing there is that we see the number of lists that they appear in is 4. So that means that in every list that there is a Dragonstone Noble, the player has taken them both times. They've taken 2.
Yeah.
Which I think says so much about where Baratheons are at the moment, and probably speaks quite a lot about where their list building stands, why they're perhaps not doing as well as people think.
Which is terrible. I hate it. Like, you know, like I tried to help Stannis build some build some Baratheon lists, and I'd been focusing on Lannisters, my first faction, my main faction, but, you know, I've been a long time Baratheon player too, and I'd been ignoring them because I was so excited about Lannisters, but when I came to build with them, it all made sense to me why they're doing so badly, which is, like, the individual pieces seem fine enough, but, like, to put together a full cohesive list is so painful right now. The loss of the NCU commander, the loss of Courtney and Axel as free pickups, and the loss of Shira Errol and Eldon Estamont and Axel Florent as 3-point NCUs. Like, they really got the bad end of NCUs increasing in cost.
Yeah, that I completely agree there. My experience, I've been playing relatively, you know, like in and around producing content and working and stuff. Like, been playing basically exclusively Baratheons and have been doing well with them. Like, I think I've dropped 1 or 2 games as Baratheons, and, like, I can see the light. Put it this way, I can see the light. But you are right; it's painful. The list building it's not easy. And I was initially experimenting with 2 NCU lists, and I was bringing a Dragonstone Noble as a 5th combat activation, and then I've switched back to 3 NCUs, and I've lost the Dragonstone Noble is the only one you lose to do that. You get rid of the Dragonstone Noble and bring a 4-point NCU, and that has worked out better for me. But it's tough. It's you know, we're getting the beats at the moment, and I don't think we should be. I think a lot of people are still. Baratheons are a really popular faction, right? It's a very, very popular faction, and unfortunately for the stats, a lot of people are playing them and losing with them, and that makes it difficult for those of us that are playing them and winning with them. And, you know, that's going to happen.
It makes it better. just
in terms of boosting
misinformation.
In terms of boosting,
you having a low-rated faction is the best possible thing that it could be for you. If you're doing well, I don't mean in terms. You desperately want Baratheons to be low-rated. I'm really happy that Lannisters are low-rated.
I don't mean in terms of boosting my own stats. I mean in terms of
actually
boosting the overall faction ego.
Yeah,
of being last rated is never good.
They don't need an ego. They have dedicated followers.
You should know, George.
Yeah. Well, I know. Like, this is it. Like, I will continue play. I will always continue playing them. I will take them to the GT regardless of what position they're in. I would like them to be in a better position. I would like Renly to have more things by then. Whether or not that will happen, we don't know. But you know,
are you going to run a Renly list just to put Renly on the table at the GT? You don't have to tell me what else is in the list. Are you going to run?
I almost definitely will. Well, I'm not sure if it will be Renly himself, but it will be Renly loyalty. But it's likely to be. It's likely to be charismatic.
We almost had him on camera there, Mickey. We almost got him.
All right, then. We'll move on from the units, though. We're not going to look too much at the bottom end for the individual divisions, just because the bottom end for each division is so, like, wildly different, because obviously Greyjoys weren't picked in this division whatsoever, so of course they're going to be in no lists. But we will talk about units as an overall towards the end. But NCU's coming up next. we have got an interesting one here with NCUs. The most picked man. The man who basically was terrible in 1.6. His stats were absolutely abysmal, except in MOD towards the end of the season. Tycho Nestoris as the most picked NCU. Bearing in mind there
That
are
doesn't
only two
surprise me.
MOD builds.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
It's obvious. It's the only way to get across the board at the moment. The only way to get across the board and not be dead is to just bring everything that heals.
Yep.
Everything.
Definitely. You'll also notice Peter Baelish, you talked about Littlefinger, making it into 14 lists in total. We'll give you the NCU breakdowns. The neutral breakdowns are available as to which list they appear on, everything later on. And Dual Mormon, out of the 10 possible lists, we see him 10 times.
Yeah.
Nobody saw that one coming. Yeah.
Illyrio comes in 10 times out of 12. Pretty big as well.
Illyrio as we go through the divisions. I think that's going to be quite a big one. I think Illyrio is a bit of a sleeper pick, I think, or a sleeper NCU. Mm-hmm. People have not really cracked onto. So yeah, not much to say about that. It's kind of what we expected, I think. And then we will briefly look at the attachments, because, you know, why not? We've got the stats here. We might as well look at them. What do we think? 10 times.
Well, Watch Captain. Obviously.
Yeah, Watch Captain, yeah.
Yep.
Unsullied. Is the Unsullied popular or not?
The Unsullied Captain.
Unsullied Officer.
The Officer, yeah.
Yeah, the Officer.
No, he's not particularly popular.
It's so interesting that they both bring Relentless, but that the Captain is absolutely dominant, constantly picked, and the Unsullied Officer just not really a discussion point because there's no ranged unit to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and boldness and courage is a huge boost as well. Like if the Unsullied, if they were both exactly the same, I think you'd see more of the Unsullied Officer, because who doesn't want extra dice on their Unsullied? But like, yeah, I think the real difference there, like by having boldness and courage versus go down fighting, it's not even a competition.
Yeah, I think it's fairly reasonable. I think the Watch Captain brings a lot for the unit as well as just that activation. Now, interestingly, I've realised, because I'm an idiot, I forgot Dragonstone Nobles can be units and attachments, so that's incorrect. I'll change that. It won't take me a couple of minutes. But what's interesting is actually the Stark attachments coming up here. The Stark attachments, 6 Mormont Vets, which is good. I don't count the number of lists they appear in just because of the simple... Oh, no, I do. I've forgotten I added that in. Yeah, so they appear in 4 lists, which is an average of about 1.5 a list, of course. And Rickon obviously appearing in 5 of the 6 possible Stark lists. People rate Rickon, obviously, to get that 3-point Shaggy Dog. Pretty popular. Shaggy good. Shaggy good. Yeah. But Mormont veterans, like, they really are bringing that hardened. Hardened, I think, as a discussion point, has been basically like, this is a really good ability. Pay a point for it, get it for free, whatever you can, get that hardened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? Interestingly, the mountain Watch Recruiters are also appearing a lot as well. And Fortune Seekers. Really, really popular neutral pick for things like Targaryen cavalry builds, as well as some of the Baratheon cavalry builds out there. So
again, you're basically looking you're looking at that risk reward of healing, right? You're looking at pass a morale test, get a heal. You're basically looking for anything. I think that people have looked for in the list building, anything which can get you across the board and mean that you're not dead to a scorpion and crossbows before you arrive.
Definitely. Right, so we'll obviously we'll leave Division 1 there briefly. The stats breakdowns and everything are available, guys. When I get this sorted and actually print it out, I'll send it out there. There was a total of 33 NCUs picked that were neutrals. There you go. And our average activations was 7.4, with pseudo activations coming in at 7.67, 7 2/3. When I mean pseudo, I'm talking about Relentless coming in, so that's from Victarion, Unsullied Officers, or Watch Captains.
Did you say it was 7 point what? Sorry, 7.2?
7.4 for activations.
7.4. That is lower than I expected it to be, if I'm honest.
There are a lot of 6 activation builds as we go through the game. there are a lot more coming in. There's only one 6 activation in Division 1, but actually the majority of lists are 7 is where the majority are sitting at the moment.
Hey, George, who's going to win?
Which team? George has decided to disappear.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm still here,
favorite.
but you cut out for a second. What was it you said? Sorry.
Who's going to win?
Who's going to win?
Who's going to win in Division 1? Oh, God.
You better get this right.
I think. If I was a gambling man, which I am, I would put my money. Actually, I think the Westerosi Warriors have got a real good shot this time round. They did very, very well last time. They were pipped to the post by I can't remember who won. Who won Division 1 last time?
Who won League A?
Yeah, League A.
Wasn't it?
It's been a long time.
Wasn't it Team Poof in the end?
Yes, Team Poof. Yeah, Team Poof took it. Yeah. Who are still around in Division 1. I think Division 1 is going to be very, very close. Very, very close. I think the Westerosi Warriors might pip it, but honestly, it could be anyone.
I'm just disappointed he didn't pick the clear winners of everything ever. Mind you, we haven't got Carlo this season, so you know.
I can say you lost Carlo, right?
He was our worst player, though, so it's fine. So there we go. Division winner from George himself, the Westerosi Warriors. So big shout out to all of our friends as well.
The Australians have been a bit quiet since 2021 came out.
Well, they've
been squirreling away some secret tech.
And also, Deoxy's got a job. And so he's actually normal life cycle now. And,
Carlo, wow.
Yeah, I know, right? And of course, they've not got COVID, so like I was talking to like Death and to Dark Angel and people like that. They've been playing like loads of games like in person and like online as well with each other. They did I kid you not, I spoke to him like two weeks into the patch and they played. Oh yeah, we played like 20 games. Yeah. Jesus. I
think they've got it. I think it's the sensible money is on them. I think they're super consistent. I think they're going to be, if they're dropping games, I think it's only going to be 1 a week. I wouldn't be surprised to see them come out with max points.
Mm-hmm. I'd be surprised to see anybody come away with max points from Division 1 actually. I think if any teams are coming away regularly with maximum points for Division 1, I think that proves that the 4-0 if you will. Someone getting 0-4 the way around. I think that proves that perhaps the system, like from obviously the last season, of like the skill matchup wasn't quite as effective as it needed to be. But I don't think that'll happen. I don't think you'll see many 4-0s or 0-4s overall. Okay then, should we move into Division 2?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, Division 2, we have got a load more stats. Before we start, if you were to predict, yay or nay, would you think the stats would be similar or completely different to Division 1 in terms of a load of things?
I think there's some difference. I think each of the divisions has quite a different makeup. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting to see that it's split that way, and I think it's going to be interesting next season when we start seeing promotion and relegation spots come down, whether that carries over.
I assume that we see more and more faction variety as we go down. That's my assumption. My assumption is that whether they actually are or aren't, the players believe themselves to be less competitive as they go down through the different various leagues, and they're more willing to pick up like a non-perceived top faction.
Okay. So we see the breakdowns there straight away. We have leading our leaderboards as always Targaryen and Lannister on 5, Night's Watch on 4, along with Baratheons, and then we have a bunch of guys at 2. We've got Stark, Neutral, and Greyjoy. Free Folk feeling pretty sad as the only faction not represented in Division 2. Sad. Fanny Violin. Yeah, I mean, it's a similar breakdown, but somewhat of a... Like, Baratheon's actually still maintaining like a decent pick rate. And people less inclined to buy into those top factions, perhaps. Thoughts?
Interesting. Like, I'm surprised. I wasn't super surprised when we saw 5 Night's Watch, but 4 actually feels like, 5 felt like a protest. 4 feels like either organized protest or people just don't rate them. Like, the thing I find odd about Night's Watch is that maybe I'm just, projecting my own opinions of Night's Watch, but I felt like nobody had super, super strong opinions on Night's Watch in 1.6. And that's actually made them see very regular play despite not being a super top tier faction. Now it feels like everybody has a strong opinion about Night's Watch, and that unless you were like, oh my god, I'm a Night's Watch player, you just don't touch them anymore, because you'll be shouted down and told that you're a power player for having played them, even though you might have just casually liked them last edition as well.
So I mean, here's the thing. Like, I want to second that a little bit. Like, I've got Night's Watch. They've always been my second faction. I've always been very, very open about that. But there's no way you'd get me taking them to a competitive event. Not now. Like, and partly that's because of my, I'm so strong a Baratheon, I'm so strongly a Baratheon player that would be always what I took to an event. But I would now be more likely to take Targs, who have been my third faction forever. I would be more likely to take, if someone said you can't take Baratheons, which of the other two are you going to take? I would almost, on principle, take Targaryens. And this is no judgment on anyone who's playing Night's Watch, or even the people that have just jumped onto it because they're the strong thing now. That's fine. If you want to do that, that's up to you. But I think you're right, Carlo. That part of it is a kind of I have people saying, no, I'm not going to play them. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stick to other things.
Yeah. And I think, you know what, actually, I think that there's a tiny bit of respect that goes out to that as well, because I know we talk about power gaming and wanting to win. Competitive players will do that. I don't like the term power gaming, but ultimately it is true. People who want to win games and win tournaments will pick what's good. But on the vice versa, I respect somebody going, look, I'm going to run something that's not optimal and see how well I can do with it. And
this was my attitude in the World Cup. This was my attitude and the attitude of a number of Baratheon players, including Vicky. We were testing out other things. This was 1.6. Mother of Dragons was making life hell for everyone, but especially for Baratheons, and Mammoths as well. We were the worst placed faction going into that because of how damaging those things were. And we were workshopping all these other factions, trying all this different stuff out, and eventually we were just you know what? Screw it. We're just going to go in and do what we do what we enjoy, even if it ended up being, in my case, an absolutely miserable experience. It was, we were just well, this is it. We're going to play Baratheons. And it's one of the things I like that you guys have brought in for the GT, is that you're doing a faction masters thing within that, a best in faction. Even if you're not going to take, if I'm going to bring Baratheons and maybe get minced up by Targaryens and Night's Watch, but I can still go and try and be the best Baratheon player. And I'm fine with that. I would love to win, obviously, but I'm fine with the idea that because I'm not taking objectively the best faction, I'm happy to have other options.
Definitely. Shout out to Elite Teddy, of course, as well, for sorting that out. That guy's an absolute legend. Cool. Right then. We'll look at commanders. And I think probably to nobody's surprise, or maybe a bit of surprise, let's see who comes out at top. We see a bunch of commanders at 4. We see Tywin, Jon, Offal. Nice even split there between Jon and Offal. There were only 4 Night's Watch players, so they all took Jon and Offal. Eldon Estamont, quite popular. And we see the rise of Mother of Dragons. Lots more picks in Division 2 than we saw in Division 1. All commanders, I think, that nobody's surprised about. I think Eldon, people have been quite vocal and saying, you know what, Eldon's really good. Guess what? He brings Hardened. Really popular pick, plays into the Stag Knight idea of that long-term game plan. I'm gonna have this tempo play, have this big unit of Stag Knights. I'm gonna come and kill you. But yeah, I mean, it's good to see though a proper mix of commanders coming through. There's not a huge amount of picks outside of those ones. A lot of the other ones are really spread, and it's you're talking about half the commander picks being picked up there at least once. Which is really good.
It feels a lot more healthy, those numbers. Those numbers feel a lot more interesting. They're just interesting. We'll see how it goes. It creates a lot more interesting matchups. Even if you end up with a mirror, you hopefully don't end up with a commander mirror or such an obvious list mirror. And that's more interesting than just, we don't want to be back at the old days where it was just howling mirrors and stuff like that. So, yeah, second division definitely looks like the more interesting one to look at in terms of its results and who's coming out on top. I think that is, to me, that's a very obvious like statement between like that's almost the way, like the more casual, not that Division 2 is casual, but this is the way the more casual people look at the game versus the more competitive people looking at the game. And it's this self-repeating cycle that I think that everyone in Div 1 is so convinced that everybody else is going to be playing competitively that they must keep up, they must match them. And that creates this cycle of like, well, we're all going to confine ourselves to play certain things because that's the only thing that can match what I assume my opponent will bring. Whereas in Div 2, I think people feel far more liberated to just play whatever they feel comfortable with.
Again, from seeing into the team rooms over the course of the pre-season prep, that's entirely the case. From what I've seen, from the conversations I'm able to see, that certainly seems to be the case for me. Especially what you said about Division 1 there. Like, I know the Rightful Heirs, for example. I'm going to single out one player, Decay, who's obviously one of my patrons. Has always been a staunch Baratheon player. Has taken Baratheon players in every competitive event he's been in. Felt obliged to play Night's Watch. And Mickey, you were the same as well. You said much the same thing. You were a staunch free folk player, but you said when it's other people in your team who you need to be winning for, you are pushed into that position, right? And it's, in a way, that's a shame. Like, I kind of wish it wasn't that way, but this is what's going to happen when you have a skill strata in inverted commas. This won't ever be perfect. It will still, as we introduce more teams, you know what I mean? It's never going to be a perfect skill strata, but at the moment, Division 1 is based on the strongest 6 teams from the previous season. It doesn't surprise me that that's ended up being the case.
No, and I think it does say a lot, and I think part of it is also it's shout out to Decay in chat there. It is actually a very important aspect, I think, in that people feel like they can't take what they want to take at the top levels, not because things that they want to take aren't necessarily okay or they can't build builds, but they don't believe that they can repeatedly win games and actually perform at a tournament level. And I think that's the concern, and it comes back down to that real standout Night's Watch. We'll not go over it again, but the issue that they're currently presenting to a lot of other.
You just have to ask yourself, can I beat those lists? And so many people in Div 1 have asked themselves, like, this thing that I want to play, can it beat that? The answer is no. Therefore, I have to scrap it off and choose something else.
I got to give credit to the Three-Eyed Roosters for sticking to their guns, though, and going with what they wanted to go with. I've got a lot of respect for that. Like, as a Div 1 team, like, I've got a lot of respect for them doing that. I think, you know, like, I want them to come out on top as a consequence of it, because, you know, I'm always going for the underdog with this. I want them to be rewarded for doing the off-meta pick, if for want of a better term. Yeah. But we'll see what happens.
So then, units. Do we think we're going to see conscripts and poor fellows at the top, like we saw for Div 1?
Yes, it's definitely still poor fellows. Yeah, why not? Like, yeah.
No.
Oh, interesting.
Ooh, Red Cloaks. Red Cloaks take the number 1 spot over poor fellows, of all things. They are coming, and they are coming in hard. Division 2...
In a way... way, that doesn't surprise me, because I think, based on what we've just been talking about, I think this is going to end up being a more aggressive division. I think it's going to have a lot more aggression in the lists, and I think, weirdly, it sounds weird saying that with conscripts and wardens being 2nd and 3rd, but then we start looking at Blackguard and Flayed Men and Pikemen coming down there, and then you've got the Mountain that rides coming in with, what's that, 7 picks there?
7 picks.
Yeah. Berserkers making an appearance there as well. I think this is going to be a more aggressively minded division, and the Red Cloaks don't surprise me with that, playing out on that panic aggression.
What's actually more interesting as well is that we see it is actually the Hunters that take the most popular pick off the Crossbowmen, only by 1.
Yeah.
But it's Hunters and Scorpion Crew who are actually more popular. Also,
combined with that higher John level pick, John Hunters are absolutely a nightmare. They're if we weren't talking about problems with Othel, we would be talking about problems with John Hunters.
Yeah.
You know.
I think we do. I agree. I do think as well, this red cloak number being so high is it's actually probably not a great thing because of the higher spread of picks of factions. Red cloaks are quite a gatekeeper unit. They really feast on people like Greyjoy's. Free
I
folk
think it's going to pay off big time. It's going to pay off big time. They found all the things. I mean, there's still 5 Targaryens, 4 Night's Watch in there, but like there's a lot. Like Baratheons are one of the few people who aren't bringing great morale. That's what's really sending them so far down the rankings. Think they're going to find a lot of lists which they get a lot of joy out of red cloaks, and I think that a lot of people will point at them and say that's a problem, whereas actually at the very, very top it's masked by the fact and they are a problem. Like, I do believe them to be a second tier issue for the game, but they're being masked by the fact that they're getting dominated by something else which is more powerful than them.
I think partly my preseason ruling has to do with the prevalence of red cloaks as well, because I've gone rules as written rather than what I believe to be rules as intended, and ruled charging as 2 actions. And I think had I ruled it as 1 action, you wouldn't be seeing quite as many red. They'd still be there, but I don't think you'd have quite as many.
Why do you believe that rules intended is 1 action when have they not literally outright stated on podcasts that they know that it's being played as 2 actions and they're happy with that?
I haven't heard it. I'd have to listen to it specifically. I don't know. I have this feeling that it's that with the red cloaks being as they are, it's either an oversight in the red cloak design, which is probably more likely, or it's an unintended interaction, which means they designed the red cloaks as they intended to design them, which was to be not busted, which necessitated charging being 1 action rather than 2. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know which one it is. It's either a unit problem or it's a wording in the rules problem, a lack of clarification in the rules. And when we see an FAQ, like everyone knows it's my least favorite part of running the TSL. In fact, I absolutely hate having to do it, and it was never going to be more apparent than at the start of a new edition. But I think had it been the case that red cloaks were getting 1 panic test off of a charge, I think you'd be seeing less of them. Would be my original point there.
I'd agree. And to back up your point about making rules decisions, Carlo, and even I've had to experience that loads.
It's awful.
Like the real problem is that unfortunately the rules just aren't quite. They're really good rules. They just need that little bit of polish. They really do.
Yeah.
I wish they just spent 10 minutes polishing them up with a player and said, right, there you go. Targeting, man. Don't get me started on bloody.
Let's not.
We've not got a spare hour, Mickey.
No. All right then. So red cloaks taking up the top spot there. We'll move over to the attachments now. Attachments again. We do count command attachments in here, so you get slightly. NCUs. Completely forgot about NCUs. I'm just sitting here ignoring my own stats. Classic. So we see Peter Baelish and Tycho Nestoris level at 10, which is slightly different because they've obviously come down. They've actually less prevalent and a higher spread. But Illyrio coming again in at 9, and to nobody's surprise, Joffrey in with all those red cloaks probably makes a lot of sense. It's what's interesting actually is that looking at the Lannister lists, the vast majority of them have got Joffrey, Sparrow, and Pycelle. That's the 3 NCUs you take.
I like Cersei over Pycelle myself. I think that's a pivot pick. Actually, I'm debating Littlefinger over the both of them. But Joffrey, High Sparrow are just so auto pick in Lannister right now, in my opinion. It's such an auto pick. The only failing is that they can't both influence the same enemy unit. But hey, we're not split hairs over that. over that.
Oh, Lannister's clearly not good.
So George, Peter Baelish and Tycho, they're the new Walder and Varys. Do you, when you look at these numbers, do you wish that you'd implemented a neutrals limiting?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I see Baelish and Tycho as very different beasts. I think Tycho, as you said earlier on, is Tycho. You need Tycho to get across the board. I don't want to limit the possibility for people to even have a chance against the Night's Watch gun line, if they, I think that's not a problem, because Tycho, let's be fair, is a once a game effect. You're not stripping people's abilities from other people. You're not Varusing. You're not turning off other NCUs. It's literally it's for all intents and purposes a blank 4-point NCU with a one-time heal 5. I don't think that's oppressive. I think it can be oppressive in Night's Watch. Don't get me wrong, but the problem isn't with Tycho there. The problem is with other, as we've said, with other parts. Baelish, I think, like I said, I've been taking Baelish a lot. I think Baelish, again, isn't a problem on his own, but is a problem in Night's Watch. So I think the problem isn't the NCUs. The problem is the Night's Watch. That's the common denominator. I think Baelish unlocks a lot of strategies for a lot of different factions. And I think that's good. I think the reason Baratheons are taking Baelish now is because Alistair Florent got so much better. I don't think you're necessarily. I am not taking one without the other. Put it that way in Baratheon lists. If I'm not taking Alistair Florent, then I'm not taking Baelish. Put it that's the way that I go with that. So no, I don't think I would have implemented it because the problem isn't them. The problem is Night's Watch.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. That's my take on it there.
Yeah.
I would, yeah. I find it super interesting that you think that a unit which is picked hugely, it has a different role, but it's picked again for its reasons of countering the meta. And so you highlight Walder as a problem, but Walder was popular because he answered the dog problem, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
And Tycho is a problem. Tycho is overpicked because he's an answer to the awful problem, but that because their style is different, that's not a problem now. I don't
know, because I don't think it's that way, right? Because Tycho answers dragons and Tycho answers gunline. That's what Tycho answers. But Walder answered walls, but Walder also answered every other option in the game. Yeah. That's the difference there, I think. Is Varys turned off every NCU, Walder turned off every ability, and happened to snipe dogs as well. That might have been why he was bought initially, but ended up being useful in every single matchup. If you're running Baratheons into Greyjoys, Tycho Nestoris isn't worth his points. If you're running, you see what I'm saying? It's a different kind of thing. It's answering a specific problem that happens to be the problem right now. But if that problem wasn't here, I don't think we'd be seeing them as auto picks.
Just to kind of respond to a lot of people in chat saying where these NCU picks are coming, you can actually see that we've got the breakdowns here for you. The vast majority of the Peter Baelish picks that we see are actually spread across Night's Watch, Baratheon, and Targaryen, and neutral. Of course, there are some neutral factions here. In Tycho, it's Lannister, Baratheon, Targaryen again, and neutral, of course. The neutral are always going to pick those guys. So neutrals are actually a good proportion of these ones. But it's really spread between Lannister, Night's Watch, and Baratheon, really, and Targaryen, of course, picking them up. Which is interesting in itself. And talking about which factions like to pick the most, it's quite spread among those guys there. I think what is quite interesting, and it feels thematic, Bruce, aside from neutrals, most picked in Stark. Just love how
that is interesting. That's not what I expected at all.
It's only 2 picks compared to everyone else's one, okay. But it is just a really interesting nitpick there, and it is the only NCU that Starks in Division 2 took. They were neutrals. All right then, we'll look at attachments then, and again we'll see. Do we think Watch Captain's going to be up there? He was up there number 1 previously.
Yeah, I mean, he's less important in the John list than the awful list, but I still think that he's pretty prevalent.
George,
he's just got value. Yeah, I think so. He's got huge value, right? As Carlo said, he's not as important, but I still, if for 3 points, you're getting a pseudo activation. Why, if you're taking hunters or crossbows, why aren't you taking him, right?
Yep. And we see him number 1 there at 6, but look at that. Bronn the Sellsword, the 1-point attachment, giving you that improved defensive abilities and the take the money bags, gain attack, coming in at 6 picks as well. These are comparative game pieces. The pieces they bring, the control that they bring. Bron is really popular, and you will see Bron up here at the end as well. Bron is a very popular pickup.
One thing I want to comment on is the fact that this is the second time that I think we saw the same in Division 1 as well, with the Mormont veteran being really highly picked.
Yeah.
What this is suggesting about Stark builds now, like Stark builds seeking that defense rather than those more aggressive attachments that you could be bringing, like trying to stick around longer.
What is actually the most interesting, if we just quickly go back to the units, there are obviously a couple more Stark picks in this. Let's just sort by A to Z. That'll do, and we'll find the Starks for us. So we see the most picked units by a long way. The Berserkers at 6 unit picks. Bowmen are up there at 3. Shaggy's in at 2 in this case in Division 2. But then everything else is basically dead meat. Like, look at I mean, how many lists there? You've got 4 I believe 4 lists for Stark in this division, and you haven't got half of the roster picked at all.
Yeah.
Not a huge number of lists, okay, but we'll see when it comes to the totals how that kind of comes out as well.
Berserkers with Mormont veteran just seems to be the go-to stable Stark unit. That seems to be the one thing that's come out.
Yeah. Activation-wise, we are at, and this is quite telling, I think. The number of activations has dropped to 7.22, so that's a decrease of about 0.2 activations on average. And the average pseudo activations dropped to 7.43, again a dropping of about 2.5 or 0.25 activations from Division 1. So Division 2 opting for typically lower activation builds. Note there are no 9 activation builds. There are some 9 pseudo activation builds, which will be nearly all Night's Watch. Oh no, they're not actually. I forget. They're all Night's Watch. That's right. I don't have them mapped properly. These stats are wrong. Ignore those bits. Those calculations are wrong for this division.
One job, Mickey. You had one job.
These ones are right. I fixed these ones, but clearly not these ones. So yeah, that's interesting in itself. Less activations we'll see there. We'll talk about it later on. We'll talk about average unit costs and things like that, because that's all been calculated as well. We'll dive into Division 3 then. It has been an hour, so George, if you do need to go, I understand.
It's all right. I'm here to talk about all divisions. It's only fair.
Hooray!
Oh, wait. Division 2.
Yep.
Who's going to win?
Oh, I forgot. Division 2, who's going to win? Yeah.
So I think Division 2 is actually, in a way, it's almost harder to call than Division 1 was. I think everyone actually has a really good shot in Division 2. I think if I had to pick my top 2, the 2 that I think are going to go up to Division 1.
No. Top 1. Top 1. I'm not letting you get away with that. Top
one. I'm going to put my money out at the Brolaw Faithful.
The Brolaw Faithful?
I think it's going to be super close, but I think the Faithful are going to take it this time round.
Okay.
They had a bad start to season 1, and they finished really strongly. I think they're gonna. If they can start strong, then I think they're going to take this. They're going to take this division.
Okay. Who was your other pick? Just out of curiosity.
In terms of my top 2, I think it's going to be the Brolaw Faithful, and and again, a team that really struggled at the start of last season, but I think have got a good shot this time, is the Lightning Lords, especially with that opening win from Jazzman over Mahoney's Law. I think that's a strong start, and it might have been it was definitely against the odds, but I'm there for it. I think the Lightning Lords have got a lot to prove, and I think they might just be able to do it.
So there you go. Brolaw Faithful, but also a shout out to Groose and the guys and Craig and the guys in the Lightning Lords.
I've got to say to Groose as well, if I was to give out a most engaged captain award, then Groose would definitely be up there. It's Groose has been super, super helpful, providing feedback on loads of stuff. So thank you very much, Groose.
I'm not even going to lie, Groose, it confuses me because the man definitely has a job, and I've literally heard him on the phone while I've been playing games and talking about the game, doing his job, but the man engages with about every single piece of content I know it's possible to engage with. So massive shout out to him, because he's a great guy as well. All right then, Division 3. Let's dive straight in. What do we think stats-wise for Division 3? Do we think it's going to be wildly different?
So I've got to say, it's what's interesting to me for Division 3 is that almost every single one of these teams are brand new this season. The only team that is in Division 3 that was in last season are the Game of Thrones boys, and the only reason they're there is because they had a late submission, a late confirmation. We had two teams that were in Season 1 that had late confirmations, ended up in Division 3 and Division 4. One of those was the Game of Thrones boys, who, let's not forget, pulled off the biggest upset of the season in the very first game last year with Gamma defeating Larks, our lowest ranked player defeating our highest ranked player. I think Division 3 is going to be far more open and free than the other ones were, but maybe I'm wrong.
I assume we'll continue our trend, which is I assume we're just going to get wider and wider selections. That's what I think's going to happen, but we'll see.
I know we have a free folk in this one as well.
We do. We actually have two.
Charles has bought free folk, and Gregor has bought free folk as well.
We have two, free folk players, which has made me immediately happy about life and everything. But we see exactly what you'd expect: 6 Targaryen, 5 Night's Watch, and 5 Lannister. And then we see 1 Stark, lowering the start numbers. Free folk 2, Baratheon still at 4. A healthy, honestly, Baratheon players, man, they're everywhere, and they just love picking Baratheons. No neutrals, unfortunately, and only 1 Greyjoy. It's back to business as usual, really, down at Div 3. It's almost like a mirror of what we saw at Division 1, really.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is we got less Starks and more Free Folk, which is a good thing. You should be less Stark in your life and more Free Folk. So, Commanders, do we think it's going to be pretty much the same?
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise. Yeah, I think while the factions are different, the commanders are going to remain largely the same. You can see there, like John and Othor at the top, then Drogo, then the High Sparrow.
What's actually interesting?
Is that Courtney Penrose is the highest ranked, highest chosen Baratheon commander?
Courtney Penrose and Loras and Stannis.
This is what I'm talking. This is what I was talking about earlier on, right? To return to the idea about why Baratheons I think are struggling is not enough people are playing the Stannis side of things. And I know that's really rich coming from me, the biggest Renly fan in the world, but like I don't think people are playing Stannis enough, or if and people are losing with Renly lists because we just have Rose Knights still, and they're not they don't pull as much weight on their own.
Not enough. Yeah, I mean, there's a healthy number. I mean, we see double Courtney, double Loras as well. Loras, literally out of nowhere, see people like, oh, I'm going to take Loras. Really random. I think, Loras randomly appears as an attachment quite a few times in either this division or Division 4. Not even going to try and understand why. Call
it the Loras division.
The Loras division, yeah.
I mean, Loras as well was the combat commander of choice in 1.6, mainly due to a lack of other options. But like, if you were playing Baratheons without Courtney Penrose, you were bringing Loras, right?
Yeah.
Unless you were bringing Stannis stuff, then Loras was what he was always my combat commander of choice. Not that I ever ended up playing combat commanders because Courtney was just was so value. But I think as well we're starting to get to the point, and this is not meant as a slight on anyone. I think it's just different levels of engagement and enfranchisement. As we start getting down to Divisions 3 and 4, you're starting to see the people who engage with the game less. And that's mainly because people in Division 1 and parts of Division 2 engage with the game all the time. So engaging with that less isn't, that's not meant to be seen as a slight or anything. It's just, I think, an observation is you have people here who are not constantly playing, constantly talking, constantly thinking about the game, right? And that, I think, is reflected in the wider range of commanders and factions.
Yeah. I think what's actually the most interesting for me is this block I've highlighted here. There's a load of Targaryen commanders that come in at 2 picks, and Khal Drogo only having 3. There's there's a massive spread of Targaryen commanders. The vast majority, we even see a Dario Naharis, Stormcrow captain, Targaryen version, entering the fray as well. There's loads of picks for Targaryens, and okay, yes, there's loads of Targaryen commanders not picked. 4 of them in the neutrals, and only Barristan and Belwas didn't get picked from the actual base Targaryen set now, which I think is actually really healthy in Division 3 to see that spread.
Yeah.
And we see as well Lannisters, 4 commanders picked there for Lannisters quite commonly, although of course Roose coming up twice as well as a neutral. I like to see a range of commanders picked. I don't like to see this. John and Othel. And if you go and see the rest of the Night's Watch, guess what? There weren't any other Night's Watch picked. In fact, I think I got rid of them off the list. Yeah.
So this is one of what I like about this is what the TSL is here for, and I think it was slightly less apparent in season 1 because we only had the 2 divisions, which meant people were, you had the players who were like, yeah, let's enter a team and see how we do, versus the people that were like, we're absolutely going to enter a team and we're going to aim to win it. This is what I like about the TSL is as you begin to move down the divisions, and obviously this will begin to settle out and things will change as we do promotions and relegations, but there is a space for every kind of player and every kind of team in the TSL. And I really, really like the fact that is being reflected in how different the compositions of the divisions are.
I really respect the opportunity. And when we get onto Div 4, we'll talk about this probably a little bit as well. But I really respect the opportunity that players who are perhaps not as confident or as not as clued up about the game, whatever you want to call it, for them to actually play in a competitive environment still and still feel that they get those games in and that experience. And, people who are actually even quite new to the game, getting to play actual competitive games and understand why lists are good or bad and learn a lot through competitive gaming. Because that's the best way, like local tournament scenes, you'd go along just to see how good you are and learn about the game actually. And I've seen it a lot as well. We'll talk about it at the end of the episode, but there's been a lot of interesting learning that's been happening over the last week or so, which is really good. Units. What do we think? Are we going to see Red Cloaks? Are we going to see Poor Fellows? Are we going to see Conscripts?
I wouldn't be surprised to see Lightbringers higher up this time round.
Lightbringers,
not at the top, but actually no, because it's all Renly commanders, isn't it? Mainly. All right, scratch that.
we have a lot of John, less awful. I think John leans more heavily into the higher cost Night's Watch units, less heavily onto the conscript side. So let's find out.
Yep.
Poor Fellows Conscripts.
Poor Fellows Conscripts Red Cloaks. Oh look,
is that 9 champions of the stag?
It is 9 champions of the stag across 7 lists. So quite a lot of people taking champions of the stag. Can I just point out, like, we've not talked about it significantly, but coming in at the number 5th pick, the highest pick Targaryen unit in this case, Unsullied Pikemen. When we summarize this later on, you are going to see an omission, if you will, of a very kind of like crazy unit, and the inclusion of these guys.
It honestly doesn't surprise me. Like, I've been singing the praises of the pikemen since the update dropped. I think they're incredible. I think they're like a multifaceted unit. They're super tanky, despite that 4+ save, and they're super killy in the right builds as well. Like, throw Danny Khaleesi on them as an NCU influence, and they're doing so much killing. It's great.
They are great. I speaking as a free folk player, I refer to them as literal mincing machines because I can't charge them. They just mince me.
It doesn't surprise me to see them being used so heavily. Like I was at first I was like, yeah, the Swordmasters are probably still going to outclass them. They just don't. That, like, being 7 points is really helpful, but like they're a super solid 7-point unit in my opinion.
So then, Carlo, at the fourth, well, one of the joint fourth picked units being Champions of the Stag at 8. What are you thinking when you see that?
I do think the Champions of the Stag are all right at 8. Like, I think that Tully Cavaliers and Knights of Castle Rock are just worse than Flayed Men in almost every situation. But Champions of the Stag, they have a role, but I think at a high level, players will really, really exploit that movement 4, and that you're basically not. Like, you're so slow that you're almost not cavalry anymore. You're basically like an infantry unit that can kind of pivot. And I think that they'll do fine if they don't get exposed in that way. But personally, I'm big of the opinion that, like, that's the classic Baratheon problem, which is they do really, really well. And the old Rose Knight problem, when people complained about Rose Knights as being too powerful, they do really, really well at the more casual, just like walk towards each other and fight kind of play styles. In the much more controlling, tactical, slow positional gameplay, they're not as effective as people would hope.
A lot of people, again, like the view into the chats, a lot of people have been talking about them as anti-Night's Watch tech, because they can survive the gun line, right? Like that 2+ armor save is super valuable. And like, yeah, it's going to take you a long time to get over there, but when your armor save is going from a 2 to a 3 rather than a 3 to a 4, there's a huge difference. It's like some people talking about just bringing Champions of the Stag like in like as a full list, which I'm not 100%. I'm not sold on myself, but I think having them there and just barreling down as quickly as you can get them across with the survivability of that 2+ save is can come in quite useful.
I think it's
interesting.
Yeah. I
don't necessarily think it will hold up myself. It's not the way that I would do it, but I can see why people are thinking it.
I think that the Othel list, the real problem with is that it has so many sources of damage. It does a lot of its damage through panic. It does a lot of its damage through no armor saves allowed and stuff like that. Like it really just punches through so much stuff. It has no natural counter, and I really don't believe that a slow 2+ save is its natural counter.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're seeing much of the same problem with Othel as I was suggesting we saw back in 1.6 with the Dragons and partly with the Mammoths, of ignoring too many of the fundamental game rules or just really putting those under too much pressure. I'm very much hoping we see a fix. I really, really hope we see a fix.
I actually wanted to give a shout out to this bad boy. You can see him at the bottom here, Rhaegal, coming in at 5 picks. He seems to be the dragon of choice. There are only 2 Mother of Dragons in this thing. So that means Drogon's got 3 picks, by the way. That means Rhaegal has been picked 3 times as a dragon of choice to include in the system. Remember rightly, Rhaegal puts out a weaken token, which I think says a lot about where the Targaryens want and what they want from the faction at the moment. I think that's quite interesting. That rather than Drogon to double down on the damage.
I still think, for me, I've said it in basically every faction overview now about how valuable I think vulnerable tokens are. So I'm surprised not to see Viserion. But I think you're right, is that what the Targaryens want is for people not to be killing them, and so weakened tokens end up being super valuable there. Because if it's Mother of Dragons, you don't care about the vulnerable tokens anyway. And other lists have other ways of getting around it.
They do, yeah. There you go, for anyone who's not sure. It is indeed the week. I just had to remind myself there. Look at that pretty dragon. Anyway, right, we'll move on. We'll move on to the NCUs. And do we think it's just going to be more of the same? More of the same? Probably. Peter, Baelish, Tycho?
Yeah, I think with the Baratheons, it's going to be Baelish for sure.
Lirio, Mapatis, Baelish, and Tycho. There's a list of names you've heard before. Jaw coming in at number 4 as well with the most picked Night's Watch. Aemon slightly behind. Yeah, it's the same people. But Illyrio really is coming in at this kind of like quite high pick for Targaryens, and I think that that potential weaken token, but specifically the 3 heal, I think is really underestimated from a lot of players.
Illyrio is my first choice of Targaryen NCU. Like it just like, because let's look, right, if you assume that Baelish it can be used as a healing NCU as well, allowing you to take somewhere else and claim the bags, right? It's an assumption, but it's a possibility, right? But even if we ignore that, you've got Illyrio, Tycho, and Aemon, 3 of the top 5 specifically dedicated to healing. Which is what we've been talking about this since Division 1. You need to survive to get across the board to take down the gun line, or to attempt to take down the gun line. It doesn't surprise me to see those NCUs up there. Even Aemon as in the mirror tech. Aemon, if you're going to be going up against the gun line yourself, then you need that healing, and who better to do it than Aemon, right?
Definitely. Shout out to Grant as well in chat, who's saying that if he had the chance, Illyrio would be his dad. There we go. The great cheese vendor himself. Okay. We'll go straight over to attachments then. We probably won't spend much time here because attachments probably pretty much what we'd expect to see. It is indeed the champion of the faith. There you go. I threw that deliberate void out there. And Glory Seekers taking the top 2 spots. We do see Bron, though, and the Mormont Veteran still up quite high, the Watch Recruiter. Notice a lack of Watch Captains, only at 5 picks. I say a lack. Still a lot of them.
Yes,
but
5
a comparative
picks,
lack.
Picks, yeah.
But it is, yeah. Champions of the Faith. People loving them in Division 3, and Glory Seekers as well.
I mean, champion of the faith in Poor Fellows. Like, what more do you want, right? It's great.
Yeah, yeah,
it's great.
I think it's a trap. I've always said that, like even back in the old days where the champion of the faith gave healing and the Poor Fellows were 5 and they became 6. I still think that moving from 4 points to 5 points is actually a bit of a trap myself. I think it shows maybe actually a little bit of list building and experience without being, too
elitist,
too naysaying of it. But they are good. They're good value. But again, like seeing that, I can only assume with the Watch Captains way down, with seeing lots of 1-point attachments, really high pick rates, that our activation count is just going to go down again.
Yeah.
I do think it's really interesting, and I've highlighted Lannister Guardsmen here. With Poor Fellows being so popular and Champions of the Faith being so popular, people legitimately prefer Champions of Faith and Poor Fellows for a 5-point unit than Guardsmen for a 5-point unit. That is, I think, a potential issue for game balance, because clearly there's something off there. If you're choosing to take a 5-point unit quite regularly, but you're actively not taking the 5-point unit, that's I think in my head that's a little bit problematic.
It's great. It's crazy that we raved about the Guardsmen when we first saw them, and that they're just not.
Everyone was panicking, right? Everyone was panicking because we saw them in isolation from everything else, and other options have come along that evidently, at least in this context, people are preferring.
The Glory Seeker is quite an interesting one. He's the attack, make a melee attack heal 2 to another unit. And again, I think it's symptomatic of what we were saying. Heal, cavalry. And there are a lot of champions of the stag. So I wonder who gets a Glory Seeker. Okay. So we will quickly have a little look at the neutral breakdown. Obviously, Free Folk didn't take any. Classic. But very few neutral picks across the board. The only one that we see significantly is Flayed Men in Lannisters. That's a big one. I don't think anyone's surprised by that. The NCU breakdown again. It's a similar kind of story to what we saw before. Fairly even split of the neutrals there. Baelish making a bit more of a headway in the Night's Watch, and Tycho in the Baratheons, like you were suggesting. What I think is interesting is that Targaryens love Walder. The Targaryen 2 list or the 2 NCU list, or the Targaryen Pyat Pre
list,
with Walder is coming out here more so in the other divisions. If you actually find out, you've got 4 Pyat Pre's in the game, so that's, I can guarantee you, I think all of the Pyat Pre lists have a Walder in as well. When I was looking at them,
I mean, it's a surefire way to get to use him, isn't it? So it makes sense.
Activation numbers we see are similar to what we saw in Division 2. We see 7.29 as the average, so it's actually slightly higher. And the pseudo activations we see 7.43. So again, like 0.25 behind what is being run at the top level. Okay then, Division 4. Oh no! I always forget about this.
Last question.
George, who's going to win?
This one's really difficult, right? Because I've basically not seen any of the teams play.
Bad excuse. Why can't you make completely uninformed decisions?
That's not me. I leave that to you guys. I think. Based on previous experience, obviously I've seen the Game of Thrones boys play. They pulled off that massive upset. I think they're in a good position. I'm going to reserve judgment on this one because I don't know the players. I'd be doing the division a disservice by predicting a winner without actually knowing the players. This is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this season, because we have 2 divisions where I'm just not familiar with basically any of the players in a competitive sense. And so I'm really, really looking forward to seeing who pulls this off.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad you said that because I haven't got half of the faction logos for the guys in Division 3. I haven't got access to them. So I wasn't going to be able to put anything up. So I'm glad you said that in the end.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just as planned.
We'll move on to Division 4. Now, Division 4, there's been... there was some bad news to start Division 4. And unfortunately, over the last day, there's been some more bad news with Division 4. Unfortunately,
yeah, so,
do you want to go
so
through
basically what happened was we had a full 24 teams. We had 4 full divisions of 6. Unfortunately, the smaller council had to pull out about a week before we were closing lists. And rather than try and search for a new team in that short space of time and get them to nominate a captain and get them to start building lists and prepare for pairing, I figured it would be the easiest thing to do would be to keep Division 4 as 5 teams and just have one team get a bye each week. Everyone in the division was fine with it. That was the way we were going to proceed. Pairings went ahead without a hitch. And then this morning, I found out from the Blackfire Pretenders that they could no longer take part. Which means that we are now down to 4 teams in Division 4, which is really not where I wanted to be. My initial plan was to basically have some of the teams play other teams twice and other teams once. The division captains decided that was what they would rather not do that and just have another bye week. So we've gone from byes being worth 3 points to being worth 0 points. Each team will get 2 byes across the 5 weeks. And next season we will have a fully fledged Division 4 of 6 teams. I maintain that we will have 6 teams in Division 4. It does, it does mean that Division 4 is not going to be quite as kind of comparable to the other divisions, but it's what the captains in the division want to do. I'm happy that they speak for their teams, that's what they want to do. I'm not going to impose anything on them that they don't want to do. It maintains the integrity of the TSL as a whole because 2 teams will still be promoted and 2 teams will still be demoted. So yeah, it will play out, and I think we've got 4 very decent teams in there, all of whom are very committed to the process. And it's just unfortunate that we've ended up in the position we have without a full division the day the league starts, basically.
Yeah. Now, when we do the analysis, those lists were submitted, the players were in. I am going to analyse the data with their lists in it.
Yeah.
I've actually seen as well, a couple of guys, Psychosti has even said, I think Mr. Ray has even said as well, that they're still willing to play some games where they can against some of the players that they've been matched against. Obviously, it won't count towards the overall standings, but they're still willing to go ahead and play the games to not disappoint people who perhaps wanted to have a game that week. Which is great because I know Carlo, you were actually at Liverpool last week with a load of these guys, and you probably met them. Nice guys, yep. I assume they are. I've spoke with them loads, but yeah. And how did your visit to them go? By the way, did it go well?
Oh, great! Yeah, we'll talk about it after we get rid of George.
All right, okay. I see how it is. But yeah, so I mean, it's a big shame. But when we do the analysis, their lists are in there, so we should analyse them. Even if the games don't go ahead, it's still worth looking at the list picks. So we see 5 Lannisters, 4 Night's Watch, 4 Targaryens, 2 of the Starks, Baratheons, and Greyjoys, 1 Free Folk, and 0 Neutrals.
Not a faction.
Neutral's not a faction. Carlo's favourite thing. Not an awful. And Free Folk basically coming in as the second least picked faction of the whole tournament. We'll talk about the whole tournament stats at the end. But yeah, again, though, it's the usual suspects. It's the usual things. It's basically the same spread that we've seen throughout. What's interesting, actually, is that Baratheons have taken a bit of a hit for Division 4. It's the first times we've seen Baratheon as low as 2 picks. This is probably your least favourite division, George. There's simply less Baratheon players.
I think honestly, it's nice to see a spread. Obviously, Lannisters and Night's Watch at 5 and 4 is we just expect it now. Targaryens at 4 as well. But it's good to see Free Folk make an appearance. It's good to see 2 Greyjoys. Again, it's diversity of factions and stuff. It's relatively balanced. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's a decent range of stuff. I'm really excited about Division 4. Division 3 and 4 are the ones I'm most excited about. Like I don't, which is not to say I'm not excited about 1 and 2, but I think one is going to be slightly more predictable. It's going to be who makes the mistakes. I think is going to lose it, rather than it's whoever makes the least mistakes. I think is going to win Division 1. Division 2, like I said, is going to be more aggressive, but I'm aware of the players. I'm aware of the teams because I saw them all the way through season one. 3 and 4 are my wild cards. So I'm just really excited to see what we come up with.
Ilya is disappointed that there aren't enough Greyjoys. So yeah. Also, Groose mentioning that it's the only division where the Targs aren't tied for the most played, most picked faction. They are actually lagging behind a little bit in this this particular division. So, most picked commander, Carlo. Go on, have a guess.
I'm going to go back to Offal. John's been popular for the past few. I'm feeling an Offal coming on.
Get wrecked. It was John and Offal both at 4 picks each. But yeah, it's predictable, isn't it? We see 3 Mother Dragons should make a bit of resurgence. 3 Mountain, we've already talked about him. And we see Rob Stark as the most picked Stark commander. The rest obviously only picked once.
Look at Brynden Tully, Outrider Commander. It was a pick coming in there as well. That's actually a wild card choice right there. I love it.
You'll never know who picked Brynden Tully Outrider Commander. Do you know which player picked him? Very popular in the Discords. Talks a hell of a lot. Talks a lot in the NRG Discord about stats and things. Really nice guy.
Let me just look through my players. Oh, of course it is. Yeah, that makes sense.
Who normally picks Free Folk. But he's decided to go really out there, pick Starks. He picked Brynden Tully Outrider Commander, who has not been picked. He's the first time that Outrider Commander was picked in the tournament. Hey, man's got a plan. Man's got something to prove. He's a very good player in a very good team. I will just quickly show you their team. I fully expect like a very good player, Nubman, very big big French player on T3, Gilbull and Tero I know less about. But then you've got, I mean, that's a good team. You've got Go Big or Go Home with like Blitz Minis, any ends back, Sultan.
I think surprisingly every team in this division has really strong players. Like I think this is going to be and especially now it's been compressed into three matches across the 5 weeks. It's going to be like they were saying it in their division chat earlier on. It's going to be cutthroat. Like they're all going to be going hell for leather for it. I mean, we've got, the Kingsguard. I've got Vicky, who was a World Cup knockout tournament. Yeah, she got through to the knockout stages. Yep. Super good with Baratheons. Got through to the knockout stages.
Nearly got that.
Oh no, nearly.
No,
she should have. No, you're right. She should have got.
I told you she wouldn't qualify, and I'm afraid she didn't qualify.
She should have qualified. Anyway, she did.
Should have isn't qualified, George.
She got super close with Baratheons. She's a super strong Baratheon player. I think it's going to give a lot of people in this division a run for their money. Go Big or Go Home took the drop from D1 to D4 because they registered late. They were supposed to be a Division 1 team. They registered late and they gave their spot and ended up giving their spot up to the Three-Eyed Roosters. Have come down to Division 4, and all credit to them, have taken the challenge on. They are fully prepared to make the climb back up. Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be a really, really fun division to see what plays out.
Definitely. I just want to highlight in there, Wop is down in this division. He's currently world number 1 ranked on stats, and he's sat there in Division 4. I think he's going to make people's lives an absolute misery. He's really just going to show people, right, this is how you do Lannisters, and if people don't bring their A game against Wop, I think he's going to cause absolute hell. I also want to give a shout out to Dwan Ring as well. He's a relatively new player, I believe. And he's been playing a lot, and he's been really wanting to learn loads. He's been really active on the Discords and things. Loads of players on here that actually I think are really good players that I've played against. I mean, spoken to a lot. So I'm really interested to see where it goes. So, anyway, we'll move on to the units. And probably to nobody's surprise, we see Poor Fellows and Red Cloaks in at the top spots. I wasn't even going to try and make that interesting for you guys. Interestingly, it's Build a Crossbowman. What's the most interesting thing about this particular setup we see here is that conscripts don't come in until much lower down. That is a little bit more interesting, I think. Obviously been a staple at the top of the lists recently. But yeah, it's Poorfoes and Red Cloaks with Builder Crossbowmen, and even Veterans coming up, making a bit of a
that I think is interesting is that people are choosing to go the veterans route. Because I think they're still good. They're being outclassed by, how good crossbows and ranger hunters are. But like, I still really rate veterans. I think they're great still.
Well, I think that veterans are a great offal pick.
Yeah.
Offal in veterans, bringing that hardened also allows you to push that spotter really far forward, allows you to get your scorpion to reroll that. Once you got the attachment, you reroll, you hit on 5s, you can kill any solo in the game. Like literally, it's just like bang, you're dead. I roll 3 dice, hit on 5s, reroll misses. You're gonna get 2 hits. That's 4 wounds, right? And that's the real oppressive thing I've found, is that. And I think that the veterans allow you to be really aggressive with that. And I think that's a much better unit for an awful build.
They're like a bunker made out of concrete and lasers, right? You can't hit them and they're going to smack you back really badly.
Yeah. And as Weasel says, I'm super happy to see those hedge knights coming in. Yeah, coming in at what's that, like the 7, joint fourth number pick. I think that they're a really interesting unit, and it's nice that it sort of breaks the monotony of flayed men. Though we haven't actually seen that many flayed men.
Not significant, not compared to the spammable cheaper units, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, really. We'll talk about point effectiveness and point cost effectiveness and things like that later on. We've got games under our belt. We can't assess that at this point when there are no games played. Not really. So, anyway, we'll move straight on to the NCUs. And I think, without a shadow of a doubt, it would be no surprise whatsoever. Peter Baelish, Tychonosaurus, Joffrey Baratheon, Illyrium Apatis. Aemon. Jaws, the most interesting one here. Only 4 picks. A relatively low number of Jaws. But yeah, it's all the usual suspects, if I will. I don't think there's anything we can really say there. We've said it enough times already. What is interesting is the resurgence of Bowen Marsh down in Division 4. There was basically no Bowen Marshes up in the top 3 divisions. But yeah, Bowen, really popular pick over Jaw, it seems, as well. It's people take Bowen or Jaw, not both, which I think is interesting. Okay. We will go straight on to the attachments then. And attachments, again, to nobody's surprise, or maybe it is people's surprise. I said that last time and I was lying to you all. And it is indeed Bronn the Sellsword coming in at the most picked character at 8, beating out the Watch Captain. With Champions of Faith again maintaining that, and then we move into a load of like commander picks and things like that. Which
interesting to see raid leaders quite high up there.
Yeah, three raid leaders coming through. There are actually a lot of, like, obviously with the free threat raiders bringing that effectively free 1-point attachment.
Yeah.
Raid leaders was the common pick. Champions of Bone come in, I think, twice as well. If I can find him, I think he's in there twice. Maybe not. That might have been another division. Yeah, I mean it's the same guys, but Bronn, more popular than anyone else, seems to be. Very popular.
Bronn does seem to be everyone's fancy man at the moment, doesn't he?
I like that. I do think that Bronn's maybe got some slight problems. I do think that Moneybags becoming an attack is like the flavor of the edition, and I don't think it's necessarily a positive thing. But I much prefer to see a character, a named person, Bronn, be there as the highest pick than seeing Watch Captain as the highest pick. Like that's just more interesting. It's better, whatever happens, I'd rather it be a character that we care about. So, at least it's got that going for it.
Yeah. We see also the neutral breakdowns there as well. It's Lannisters who are picking up neutrals by far the most, with Blackguards, Stormcrow Archers, Flayed Men, and Hedge Knights appearing in Lannister lists by far more than any of the other factions, which I think is quite interesting because Lannisters have been kind of well regarded as having some quite good units, but it seems like they're really leaning on the neutral units for certain aspects down in this division. We see a similar kind of picture. It's Targaryens, Baratheons, as we know from Baelish, Tycho picks, but it's again Lannister who are kind of like bringing in a lot more other picks there with things like Roose and the only Varys that we see in Division 4 coming up in Lannister pick. Okay. Activations line. We're down at 7.07 average activations. That is, call it, round it nicely, 7.1. That's a 0.3 drop on average activations from Division 1. Another 0.15 drop from the other divisions. And pseudo activations are down at 7.3. That's a 0.37 drop off the back, nearly a 0.4 drop off the back of pseudo activations from Div 1. So it's clear to me that there's a lot more lower activation lists, and we see that here. There are 3 Night's Watch lists that have got 6 activations. Pseudo activations, of course, aren't counted. They have higher pseudos. And 1 Baratheon. There's 2 Targaryen lists, and in this case, one of those 6-point lists actually has an Unsullied officer. So we see an Unsullied officer actually coming in Stormcrow Archers, I believe.
There's another point in this division to point out as well, is that I don't know how true it is across all the teams, but I know it's true of the Kingsguard. I think all of them, all 4 of them, only have 2 NCUs in all of their lists.
I was going to talk about that because I have got the stats on 2 NCUs versus 3 NCUs, and I was going to talk about it overall because looking at each division is fine. But we see of the 40 lists for this session, we see 2 NCUs. 40 lists, so everybody's taken at least 2 NCUs, and we see 23 lists with 3. That means 17 lists with 2 versus 23 with 3. We will look at the overall totals in a second, and we'll look at the overall 3 versus 2 meta. It's very common to see about 10 of the 48 lists in each, 10 to 15 being 2 NCUs. That's quite common. So we'll jump straight to Division 4 then. I mean, you said it was difficult to pick. Is there any winners that you think you're going to pick out, or are you just gonna kind of cop out of this one and say the Kingsguard are going to win it because
the Kingsguard are my Kingsguard. Every single one of them is a Kingsguard tier patron. So like I have to throw. Last season I threw my support behind Buddy Gang because they named themselves after Buddy the 3-Sales Beagle. I have to want the Kingsguard to win this time, and I think they're going to stand it. I think they stand a good chance. But honestly, I think. Like, you've got a Division 1 team in Division 4, and that's go big or go home. And I think, but having said that, because this for Division 4, this season is 3 matches. If you mess one of those up and you go 0-4, which it could happen to anyone, that can make her some real swings in this one. So I think every team that wants a promotion spot out of this is going to have to play without putting a foot wrong. I think it's going to be go big, go home to win it, but honestly, it could be any of the 4.
Okay, what do you reckon, Carlo? You say, I mean, obviously you don't know the teams very well, but what do you think of the Kingsguard?
Yeah, no, I recognise a lot of names from there. It is a hyper-competitive division, and I would expect go big or go home to just partly from the experience of having played team tournament before, whereas the others haven't together. I think that's pretty much all 4 players returning.
It is.
I don't know if it's maybe
it's all 4.
3 of them,
all 4 straight up.
They did very well last time, and I would expect them to be able to perform again here.
Okay, so there we go. We've got the Kingsguard there for George being, representing his favourite people. So that moves us on to the overall stats. So,
at which point, gentlemen, I will take my leave and let you go down heavily into the stats. But thank you so much for having me.
No worries, George. Thanks for coming down. Obviously, go and check out all of George's great content over at 3-Sales and all the various different things he's been doing. Obviously, the faction overviews are now finished, and he's embarking on his next project, which is the narrative painting series with Grant, which is looking some really good stuff. I believe that Grant, am I right in saying this, is that Grant painting up a Stannis side force that you're going to actually be taking to the GT?
I will be taking it to the GT, yeah. So I've designed a list that is subject to some changes, but we've basically designed a list with the key elements of the list that I'm going to be taking to the GT. We released the first episode yesterday. Grant did an incredible job on Davos and some Queen's Men. Like, this is like best army winning painting here. Like, beyond a shadow of a doubt. You need to go and check them out in the video to see it. But we're doing monthly episodes on it.
So, as there is a best army prize,
there is.
He's mad. Seriously, you wait till you see these Queen's Men. The work he's done on these Queen's Men is unbelievable. And every unit is going to be fully customized. Basically, every unit is becoming a diorama that's also usable on the battlefield. So yeah, like the episode's been up since yesterday, nearly 1,000, pushing 1,000 views already. So go check it out. Let us know what you think, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you don't need a shout out from us, really at all. But yeah, no. Obviously, best of luck with all of that, and you know, it's interesting to see a lot of people engaging with the content as well, which is great to see.
Yeah.
All right then, George. Well, thanks for coming down. We'll catch up with you later on in a couple of weeks or so. When we've seen some things, we'll talk about actually the results of the stats, and yeah, all the best.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, gents.
Thanks, George.
Bye.
So. That's George is gone, which means we can now get the cat out of the bag and say all the naughty, horrible things. No, let's not. There's no reason to. And let's face it, we've got some stats to look into. So this is the overall stats. So me and Carlo, we're not going to spend a huge amount of time going into this because we know it's been nearly 2 hours already. But we are going to discuss the finer points, the overall kind of what we feel, our analysis a little bit. So we'll start off with the faction picks. 21 Lannister and 21 Targaryen, with 18 Night's Watch, 13 Baratheon, 8 Stark, 5 Greyjoy, 4 Free Folk, and 2 Neutrals. Healthy, not healthy, good, not good. Where are you standing on that?
Not healthy. Not healthy when we see the 21, 21, 18. I'm of the opinion that the 18 is also a false 18. That's people choosing to shy away from them because of all the negative press that Night's Watch have been getting, all the claims of it being an MPE to play against, and that nobody wants to play into it. So I think that that's actually even falsely deflated. They're getting a way worse rep than Starks ever did when they were dominating the game. Probably similar kind of rep that Mother of Dragons had at the end of 1.6. Like, just like nobody wants this. Like, not just like, oh, I don't want it. Like, literally, people will actively complain about their opponent having played it.
Yeah.
The Baratheon split shows. I mean, they've always been popular. Like, I mean, I really do believe that they're basically the worst faction in the game right now, and yet we see them being massively popular. I think they're going to take a lot of losses myself. And I'm actually more interested to see how that Stark, Greyjoy, Free Folk kind of percentages come out. They're the ones that I'm interested in.
Yeah. What I want to do, guys, by the way, for this next portion, if there's any stats you want us to actually cover in a bit more detail, there's still nearly 40 people watching. Thanks a lot for the huge number of views that we've been getting on these lately. If you've got any stats you want us to deep dive into today, drop us in chat and we'll try and get along to it if we can. We'll be going through orders, obviously commanders first, and then going through other things. Some of the stuff, I'll be honest with you, I haven't done the full analysis on everything just yet, so it might be a case where we get back to you at a later date. But at least we'll be able to get back to you. So, commanders, it is probably to literally nobody's surprise that we see the same commanders at the top, and it is Othel the Boogeyman coming in at 20 picks. That means that Othel's been picked more times, as we already know. Othel has been picked more times than
the Night's Watch.
Yeah, the Night's Watch have. John obviously coming in at 16 as well. Like, there are, as far as I'm concerned, there are no other Night's Watch commanders.
That is actually getting, like, that's pretty ridiculous. We've never seen in every other tournament, if a faction picks up a huge percentage of input, it will always pick up a few tail other commanders. The absolute certainty that people are at with Othel and John being the two things is crazy. Like, actually, it makes me sad, you know. How didn't you pick that up? Like, how did you not? Everybody sees it just from reading the cards and understanding the game. How did the designers and the playtesters not, you know, how did the designers not pick it up? Then how did the playtesters not manage to communicate back to the designers that this is a really, really big problem?
Yeah. It's not great, is it? To be honest. And it is slightly worrying that that the just like not getting a single other pick outside of the big two.
Yeah.
It's symptomatic, perhaps, of people thinking, I've got to run the good stuff. But like, man, just it's a sad. Just a sad statistic, unfortunately, and it is sad for the game.
Like
Sad for
you know,
Watch.
in the heaviest days of heaviest days of Howland Rob domination, you still saw some Great Johns, some Brendan Blackfish. You saw other people much lower represented, but they were represented. Nobody else is represented at all.
Charles points out a very interesting point. Of course, no one picked these guys up because Donald Noy was picked up, and he was going to be nuts and problematic as well, which I won't dive into today. You can go back and watch our review of units and commanders. Go watch the Vision in Flames of the Night's Watch. But yes, that's actually a very important thing. You've got to remember that this is after Night's Watch got toned down.
Yeah.
Dear Mother of God.
I know, like, what the fuck? God. Yeah. Crazy.
Right. Anyway, Khal Drogo, popular pick, really popular for that. The Targaryens alongside Mother of Dragons is probably expected. But Tywin Gregor for Lannisters as well. Loads of good picks there, and you know what? These are not unhealthy numbers, right? Of 20, 21 picks, 12 people picking Khal Drogo. Okay, some people picking him twice, but like that's not that unhealthy. There's going to be popular commanders, and for them representing about 50% of the lists, or not even 50, it's a quarter of the lists. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mother of Dragons is a little bit more concerning because it's not actually a commander; it's more like a list build. I kid you not, because I have to type all these lists out manually, by the way. I have to go through the stats site, load them all up, and then type them all out manually into this, which I'm not going to show you the nitty gritty of, but look at that. That's me typing them all out. All goodness knows how many of them. I literally typed out the identical Mother of Dragons list several times. And I kid you not, it's identical. Every component, even because I do it in the order they're added on the stats site as well. It's literally Mother Dragons in Unsullied Pikeman, Dragon, Illyrio, Tycho, Walder. Or Illyrio, Pyre, Walder. Kid you not, exactly the same.
Yeah, that's actually my biggest problem with Mother Dragons, particularly at 40 points, because it just creates itself. There's so little variance there. There's so little chance for a person to put their personal identity on the list that I think that the whole concept of bringing 3 dragons for 7 points each is bad list design.
Yeah. Let's go down and see the sad end of the scale, shall we?
Wayne's DuPont. Yep. He asks a really interesting question, which is what's the perceived most valuable keyword between Sundering, Precision, Crit Blow, Intimidating Presence? I mean, I can tell you it's hardened. I mean, you didn't list it there, but the thing that people want is hardened. Yeah, there we go. Ilya's replied. Ilya also knows that it's hardened.
I can look into that, though.
You included a load of offensive ones. Everybody knows that hardened is everybody's favorite ability right now. I would be kind of interested to know what the offensive keyword that people are going for. I would lean towards maybe Crit Blow is still popular. I think that people's favorite keyword is precision, in my opinion, but it's just kind of rare. It's not easy to pick up precision.
Yeah, so Charles is right. Sundering is probably the most common. We'll come to it and we'll see it. Hobbit saying hello. Welcome back, mate. I know you've missed out the rest of the episode. Don't worry, it's great. You'll love it on repeat. Ilya pointing out there that saying hardened twice in chat, just to really hit home that it is hardened. Right. So we'll go to the bottom end of commanders now, but I will look at that. I'll look at the most valuable keywords that people rate. I have got a key which I can use to kind of like rate units and things like that and work out what keywords are there. So I'll do that analysis for you based on these stats. So I'll come back to you with that one next week, ones. So watch next week's episode for your answer fully. The other question is either what sorts of lists Tywin in. Now, again, I will not show you this on stream because it will require sorting all this data fully and doing that like individual deep dive into that analysis. But again, WOP, I will get back to you with that that request there. So how
I would
does
guess
Tywin...
halberdiers and red cloaks.
Yeah.
Probably red cloaks then halberdiers. Halberdiers didn't appear that commonly, but I think that there's still a very common bunker for Tywin.
Okay then. Okay then.
I think you're going to show us the unpicked commanders, the sad boys of the edition.
Going through them. Brynden Blackfish, Bruce Bolton. So neutral commanders I've kind of got. I don't really care too much about in other factions. But Brynden Tully for Starks, Joffrey for Lannisters, taking a massive hit. All of the Night's Watch commanders we've already talked about. Load of Free Folk commanders just for sheer lack of picks. Load of Baratheon commanders with Davos. Well, only Davos actually is native. And then Greyjoys is people like Theon. Well,
so the Greyjoys and the neutrals and even to it's hard to say, and the Free Folk, they feel semi okay because they've hardly picked up any. Yeah. We do need to be a bit concerned about the factions that got tons of picks and yet a commander was never picked up. So yeah, Davos, interesting. Whether or not people value his NCU, I never saw him as a particularly common one, but like people have talked about him as being quite an important piece on the Stannis side.
I just want to read out Rams's comment because this is great. Chris Tran in a tank top makes me hardened. This is not safe for work, kids, by the way. Not anymore.
Never has been. Never has been. Don't be coming.
We definitely put this is not suitable for kids. No, this is not suitable for kids. It's fine. All right then. Yeah. So some pretty sad ones there. I think Theon as a Greyjoy commander is pretty sad because he's a maneuverability commander. People not rating him. I would have liked to seen Harmer or Rattleshirt because I've actually had some success with these guys over Tormund recently. A bit weird for myself. Obviously, the Night's Watch being pretty bad. Joffrey is actually really sad because Joffrey Kingsguard as a result as a unique unit will not get picked. But Joffrey was actually you ran Joffrey a lot, Carlo, as a competitive commander. He was actually competitive in the right kind of build and he could work.
He's taken a dual hit. His NCU is now an auto take rather than like a bit of a hindrance, and like he was in there in the past. You could build around him, you could make heavy Kingsguard lists, but like it wasn't particularly the obvious choice. That combined with the fact that his cards got worse, his unit lost its cavalry maneuver, like loads of things are stacked against him, and he's just turned into a non-thing. I've no real interest in playing him myself other than just like I'll test him, see what it feels like, and then probably say, yep, that's just what I thought, which is I don't like him anymore.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay then. So I just picked up Belisarius there. It'd be interesting how often Baratheons are taking loyalty units over their non-affiliated units. We might be able to answer that one for you today, but I've got it down as something I'll do a deep dive into as well. So we'll go to units, and units probably to literally no one's surprise. If you've been here for any of the episode, you can probably guess what's going to be at the top. Carlo. All
right, let me just
rack that brain of yours.
Yeah, no, I am trying to work it out. Think it's Poor Fellows, then Conscripts, then Red Cloaks. Is that the order?
I think what you should have said is 4-point units, then not 4-point units.
Yeah.
We see, Poor Fellows, Conscripts, Red Cloaks. Yeah. But I'd just like to point this out. That 52 Poor Fellows, that's a lot. Conscripts at 44, that's a hell of a lot. 41 Red Cloaks, 31 Unsullied Pikemen. Yeah, that's actually pretty big as well.
They're savage. They're savage at 7 points. They are savagely undercosted at 7 points, and they are making Unsullied Swordmasters a non-thing. Like, maybe you're already going to come on to it, but where are the Unsullied Swordmasters? What are their numbers at?
We'll come on to that in a second.
Okay.
But Poor Fellows, I mean, we talked about the Poor Fellows and Conscript effect now recently, but look at those costs there, right? You're seeing a huge amount of investment in low-cost units, backed up by some higher-cost stuff. Look at that. The most picked stuff at 6, 7, 8 points, because it's backed up by those short-costed units. The highest picked Baratheon unit we see is Baratheon Wardens, and it's still like in the 16 lists they appear in, 24, that's 1.5 Baratheon Wardens in every list that you see. This is why Baratheon list building is
right
bad.
back to, buy a cheap dog, hide it in your deployment zone, take a powerful berserker unit, charge it into somebody. Except now it's buy some cheap poor fellows, spam your red cloaks around the board, getting free panic checks, or buy your cheap conscripts and then just spam your crossbowmen rapid firing into people. It's that activation disparity. It's that very powerful, supported by activation delay, which is what these do. And the conscripts and poor fellows also are just very self-sufficient. Conscripts have a great support role. The conscripts are orders of magnitude. We've shown it a few places. The one thing that you can't see on the site yet that I can see and is still in development with tournaments is the unit ELO rankings. Conscripts are an order of magnitude more highly ELO rated than any other unit. They are the enabler of what Night's Watch are currently dominating with.
Yeah, and this is where people say, how do you nerf Night's Watch, Knife Watch? People highlight Jaw, people highlight the crossbowmen. People are not highlighting the actual problem, which is, I think the deck is just nuts. And conscripts are such an enabler, such a ridiculous enabler, that because you can't reach them, because crossbowmen get in the way.
I think that the whole discussion would be entirely different if conscripts just cost 5 points. They could be better, but if they just cost 5 points, the whole feeling around that list build would be very different. I don't think it'd be good. There'd still be problems, but it'd go a long way.
Yeah. Let's go down towards the middle of the list. You see, the most picked dragon was Drogon. In fact, it did come out at the top, even though Rhaegal did make his appearance. But Rhaegal's still putting in time. It is in fact Viserion who's the least picked. But unplayed units, Carlo. There are some. There are in fact 2 completely unpicked units. 3 if you count the Kingsguard, but we've already talked about, a named character unit can be unpicked if it's specifically in this case with it only being a commander one.
You already asked earlier, so I think I already know the answer. But it is what I guessed, which is great axes. Well, I guessed great axes and I guessed mammoths, but I believe the answer is actually skirmishers.
The answer is in fact not great axes, I believe. I think I got this wrong when I was quoting
totally wrong.
Great axes got 1 pick. Even Eddard Donnerguard got picked. Knights of Casterly Rock picked once. Lannister crossbowmen, they got picked once. War Mammoth, there's a War Mammoth out there. There's even a King's Men and some Queen's Men. There's some Cutthroats. There's Zorse Riders. There's no Kingsguard. There is not a single Ranger Tracker unit. There's not a single Dervish unit. Okay, Targ Dervish unit, so that doesn't really count. And bloody Mama Skirmishers. Remember that 6-point unit that we all said would change the meta completely because Agile is a thing? He then took Agile away and gave it Disrupt, and everyone was like, that's a piece of shit.
Ranger Trackers makes a lot of sense. That's, we talked about the fact that at the 7 cost level, there's just better choices everywhere for Night's Watch.
Yeah.
But I still didn't predict it. I still didn't think, name a bad unit, Ranger Trackers. But there we go. Yeah, I can see it. Bloody Mum Skirmishes is kind of crazy when we talked about, we thought that they could be pretty game breaking when they had the Agile keyword, and now they're with that Disrupt, and it's just a non-thing. Can you believe that they were the most non-thing last edition, and now they're the most non-thing this edition too?
They did a really great job in fixing that unit, didn't they? This is really sad to me because bloody Mama Zorse Riders and Mama Skirmishers, when we looked at the stats with the first NRG event, when we did this before, when we've looked at things previously, they're just not picked, and 2021 hasn't changed that. And it's really sad. It's really sad to see those units not doing well. By the way, if you're wondering why does the Kingsguard appear in 12 lists but actually not picked at all, because the attachments all have Kingsguard in the name, and I'm an idiot and didn't call this Kingsguard U.
Sensible.
But Ranger Trackers and Bloody Mum Skirmishers, the only unpicked units outside of the Kingsguard. So again,
I really think that Skirmishers is a sad tale because either they reacted to everybody's reaction to the to the visions, right? They showed them in the visions. They either reacted to that without doing any testing, which is terrible, or they came to that answer themselves, yet showed us something, and they completely came to the wrong answer again. Like either way, there was actually a really long discussion, actually, like literally as the show was starting in the Sunday Slaughter Discord, about almost like whose fault it is when balance is bad, right? And the point is that it's never the player's fault. It's never the community's fault that balance is bad. And it's never content creators' fault for saying, "Oh, I think this is overpowered" or whatever, because we don't make choices. We don't get to do anything. We don't get to do any testing. It is somewhere between the developers and the playtesters, and whether or not you think that the playtesters should be blamed at all, or whether or not they get to also say, "Well, it's not my fault. I just do what the developers tell us." But it's 100% them. Like, in my opinion, now, just because the conversation was going on, but there was this massive conversation about, whether or not they reacted to had knee-jerk reactions, whether or not the developers had knee-jerk reactions to the community giving a knee-jerk reaction, and whether or not now the community has to be really careful about what they say about a unit in case it gets over-nerfed. Like, if we talk about Night's Watch too much and say they're too powerful, and we do all this stuff and we complain about them, then they're going to get over nerfed. Well, that's the developers doing badly again and again and again. The community say this is an issue for us. Please go and fix it. They don't tell the developers how to fix it. They say, please fix it for us.
Appreciate that comment there as well, Belisarius. It's great. Thanks a lot. It's problematic, I think, and I agree. Blaming the idea of the community or the content creators or anybody, like even playtesters, I would never blame playtesters for bad balance, because playtesters, in some cases, playtesters that me and Carlo know, and that they know that there's problems and they're willing to admit that there's issues, but they're also willing to admit, we kind of knew that there were, but it didn't matter. And that is unfortunate. One thing I want to point out is Summer only makes one list from the Starks. Do you remember Bran and Hodor? Do you remember them from 1.6?
Remember Bran Zerkers? I remember.
Pepperidge
Farm remembers.
No one else does. Because, just not picked. I did make a pick in one list, and I shout out to somebody who is keeping 1.6 alive in their hearts, because they had a Stark list that had all three, I think it was Rob Commander, Rickon, and Bran, and it had all three wolves.
Oh, legend.
Carrying the torch. But
it's now 6 activations.
Exactly, yeah. Greywood was picked up 3 times, and nearly almost exclusively with Rob Commander, and it was indeed Shaggy Dog, who we see 8 times.
Shaggy's still good.
Shaggy's still good.
I think they'd all be more viable were it not for Scorpions being such a nightmare. I just think that Scorpions invalidates so many options, makes Solo such a bad pick.
I did say we would look at this, so let's actually have a look at the Baratheons, and let's see if the choice between that's convenient native or non-native loyalty units was more popular. And I think you can see there with Wardens, Champions of the Stag Knights being the most popular units there, Sentinels up there. The only unit that actually sees more play than any of the non-loyalty units is the Dragonstone Noble, purely because it's a 4-point activation. And he's picked up 11 times in 6 lists. That means he's picked up twice in every single list, bar 1. That is clearly picked up as a 4-point activation. That is why he's being picked up twice.
Yeah, and that's what's actually really enabling the Stannis side to be the more popular side, is that Renly's having even more list building problems than Stannis is, because that 4-point is such an enabler. I don't like taking it twice myself. That's why I had such an issue with Baratheon list building, because I think, like I say, just again, it's that awful list. It's that Scorpion is going to kill you. And that's not even like, it's not, we're not talking about, remember when people used to be like, oh no, stone thrower costs 10 points or whatever. We're talking about a 5-point scorpion here, guys, right? A 5-point scorpion is just going to end your day. And you're like, oh, what about the other 35 points in that list?
Yep.
So, yeah. But yeah, it's Rose Knight's popular on the Renly side, considering that Renly hasn't picked up many picks, despite their nerf, right? They were nerfed. They effectively lost one of their abilities, which they now have to buy back for a point within an attachment. Yeah. Baratheons are in a tough spot.
They are. And hopefully that answers your question there, Belisarius. And Naklab, can you bring Shaggy to 7 attacks by attaching Caitlyn? No, she makes him attack at maximum ranks. He's on 1 rank with 4 dice. The extra attacks don't come from the ranks, so unfortunately don't interact with Caitlyn. Okay then, so that is units across the board. Talked about those and the missing unfortunate ones. Let's look at NCUs. We already know where this is going, I think.
Yeah. I think this is the one I was like, we didn't really labor on it. Like we joked about the fact that it was so predictable. This one, this one is the one that makes me most sad. Like how continuously consistent and predictable this Baelish, Tycho, Illyrio, Joffrey, Jayor, Aemon, like that chunk of 6 make up such a huge proportion. That like, well, we just swapped the Varys. That's why I was kind of like pressing George on it. He seems to think that Petter Baelish and Tycho are this totally different thing, and now neutral NCUs aren't a problem. But we just swapped 2 neutral NCUs being an issue for the game for 2 different neutral NCUs being an issue for the game. Like, I don't think we get to pick and choose why. Like the others were a control piece, and that's an MPE, whereas these are healing. But I mean, like, Pet is a control piece anyway. Like they're just a different manifestation of the same problem, in my opinion, which is why I was quite confused by the fact that he thought that this was fine. I think that it's not great.
I think the difference is with these two, although I think they're the same issue, they don't bring a negative play experience to the table as well. Whereas Varys and Walder were very much a solution, but also a negative play experience.
Yeah.
And so, they bring a solution, but it doesn't feel bad to play against them, if you know what I mean. Even though it kind of does if you play against Night's Watch.
What I also think super telling about this is, it's just like this whole idea that we're going to move to like a less NCU game and stuff, which we'll come to, but like it's so repeatable that it's 4-point NCU, 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 4-point NCU. Barristan Selmy, massive tech piece at 5. He's the only and first NCU that I ever consider at 5. Everybody else is just spamming the cheapest NCUs they can. That's still the way the game is played competitively. You play the cheapest NCUs you can. Moving them 3 to 4 points just hurt all the factions that were buying, had more 3-point options, particularly Baratheons. And,
What's interesting is we saw Lord Varys in at 4 points, then in the Visions, and then he changed to 5 points, and wildly less picked, down at only 8 picks across the whole TSL.
4 to 5 transition for an NCU is just like, you better bring game-changing abilities at 5 points, because I have so many options at 4 that like have very strong, they do very strong things at 4. So why would I ever buy you at 5? And it's crazy to me. I've always said for a long time, I would actually much rather they made every NCU the same price and leveled their abilities as best as possible, and every NCU was 4 or 5, maybe. Like maybe we'd stop having this NCU spam if every NCU was 5 points. I used to say when it was 3, 4, and 5, I said, okay, pick the 4 and make them all 4s. Now we're talking about 4s, 5s, and 6s. I'm saying maybe, okay, pick 5 as your points value and level them all at that. But I don't like the big steps in value between the 4, 5, and 6.
There are obviously NCUs that were not picked. We'll look at those in a second. But to answer a quick question I saw from Charles before, he wanted to know how many Thens were there. Let's have a little look. There were 4. 4 Thens across 3 lists. Yeah. How many Thens made it?
Low, but not non-existent.
2 Bone Lords chosen. 2 Giants. Anyway, that was just a quick aside for Charles. Let's... Obviously, when we look at these, we should realistically look at them in terms of factions as well. Obviously, if a faction is picked less, the command or the NCU will be picked less. But before we break it down by factions, let us look at the bottom end, right? Not a single NCU went unpicked.
Even 6-point Melisandre.
Howland made it. Sansa, Axel, Eldon, and Melisandre. There's going to be data on every single NCU, probably, assuming people actually pick more than one list.
Yeah, they're going to have to play the lists, Mickey.
Yeah, I know.
Let's,
But every NCU was picked. That's at least a little bit encouraging, right? A little bit. You know?
Yeah.
Was it Davos?
I do.
Last season it was Davos, I believe. NCU Davos was unpicked.
The crazy thing about Davos, remember, was that he had multiple variants, an attachment, a commander, and an NCU, and none of them got picked. The name Davos never got picked.
No.
Yeah.
Whereas these Davos has been picked, so I'm a happy man because Davos is great. Humble onion smugglers, by the way. So yeah, that's a good thing in some ways. And actually, you know, yes, there's like five down at 1, but actually there's not that many at 2 and 3, and there's a consistent number at 4, 5, 6, and 7 picks. There's a lot in that middle area who are being picked up, used. So that's healthy. I think the middle to top end is fine. It's just that there are some clear outliers. We'll look at the individual factions just quickly. Go on before we go into the real nitty gritty of 3 versus 2. So we see in Baratheons, it's Eldon, Axel, and Melisandre. Now, Eldon's somewhat a symptom of his commander being picked a bit more, but Melisandre people just don't like. Courtney Penrose, Shira, bizarrely, picked loads comparatively, and yet I think most people thought Shira was terrible. So
yeah, no, I didn't buy into the idea that she was terrible. I thought she was an amazing 3-point NCU. She became a 4-point and gained like the tiniest little buff, right? She gained, well, actually, and the tiniest little nerf at the same time. She could only move a token rather than just apply a token.
Yeah.
And I believe she gained like an extra zone that she interacts with, though. I forget. Like I say, I've really only dabbled in looking at the Baratheons. They seemed fine to me until I started to look closely, and then I started to see their flaws.
Regarding the 2 versus 3 NCU discussion, which we'll get into in a minute, that I know Tara and Charles are having, we will get into what that means and things, and we'll talk about, like, me and Carlo talk about our opinions and how that can be changed. Carlo's already said making them 5 points. I've got some other ideas that I think I'd like to see as well, and I think they missed the point. 1.6 to 2021. Anyway, Free Folk, it is Ygritte and Val who are picking
my light
most.
just went off. We've been here that long.
Yeah, you're just like in the dark now.
I've just been plunged into darkness.
Carlo's floating.
I'll be
back. So we see, again, relatively healthy, although Val and Ygritte just like clearly popular. Mance being the least. Mance again coming up as the most popular Free Folk commander though. Greyjoy, Windermere, we called it. We called and we said Windermere is probably the best, NCU, and it's come true. People seem to be thinking that. We'll see how his stats come out, obviously, overall. But yeah, air on the damp hair. That's what I call him now, by the way. Damp hair. In at 3 picks. Least popular. Probably not great. I know that Lockerbie's been trying him out, but yeah. Popular. Joffrey, we've talked about him before, but the least picked, Tyrion, the Imp at 7 and Cersei at 8. Healthy picks.
I know people are really into weakened tokens and stuff. Maybe it's because I played him too much with Tywin and I end up with like every opponent being weakened. But I still don't buy into into Pycelle as a 4-point. Like, I think I'd rather be picking up. I'd definitely rather have High Sparrow myself, and then I'm considering Cersei and Bruce and Tycho and Littlefinger as all other things that I could take instead of Pycelle. But maybe I'm just being wrong. Like, maybe I'm just being stubborn about the fact that he used to cost 3 points and now he costs 4 points, and I don't like it. And but I can't quite buy into the idea that he's the second best NCU.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And Tyrion, like, I know Tyrion and Cersei fighting it out for last place. With Tywin's not that far ahead, but Tywin's obviously 6 points. Tyrion at 5 as well. I think prices him out of the game slightly, unfortunately. Even if it is getting counterplot, which I think is a great card. Obviously, we talked about the neutrals and the top end of neutrals, but in it, surprisingly, actually picking up 2 picks, Jack and Hagar follow the Red God, that copying of influence effects or giving precision, people actually put a lot of emphasis and said, "Oh, it's really good." And I think since then, because the threat of precision being common meant that people didn't build precision units and lists, or lists where those things would be good, and as a result, Jacken actually doesn't get picked because he's not getting played against the stuff he's good against. But yeah, it is what it is. The next one though, Night's Watch. We already talked about the top end. That is absolutely, and excuse my swearing here, that is fucking
That's night
depressing.
and day.
That is unbelievably fucking depressing. To have
that's Jor, Amon, Littlefinger, or Jor, Littlefinger, Jor, Amon, and Tycho. That's basically the 2 setups you get. And the rest is
some
just
people
rogue
adding in
stuff.
Othel and things like that. I run Jor, Amon, Othel in my John list, for example. I don't know what we can say about that. That's
Bad.
not healthy.
No, Night's Watch are just not healthy in almost any category. It's not a single unit, which is the problem, though. I do believe that conscripts have a large role in it, but they're just like every single category. NCUs, not healthy. Commanders, not healthy. Unit selection, not healthy. Deck, not comparable to other people's decks. It's way different. It's way more powerful. I don't understand. I don't understand what happened there. They missed the mark big time.
Stark's a little bit healthier, I think. Caitlyn and Eddard as popular picks, and then a spread across the rest. There aren't that many lists, and Caitlyn is very good with the removal token and hitting on max ranks, or highest dice. Very important with things like Berserkers as a common unit pick. So Caitlyn's quite common, and I think people really rate Eddard for the healing, and also the re-rolling of panics, which is a big thing when you've got panic death machines that are created. But yeah. There's not much again to say there. I think.
It's funny. It's funny how much your opinion on these things change. I've suddenly got this soft spot for Starks that, obviously you never had for them when they were just dominating the game and they're a real pain point for people. I'm really rooting for Starks. I'm not particularly rooting for Baratheons. They've got tons and tons and tons of dedicated players. They have tons of viable builds. I'm rooting for the people bring in these janky, weird Howland Reed Overwatch Bowman lists or these She-Bear Berserker lists. I'm rooting for those guys. Suddenly they're the underdogs, and I like the total flip in play style. I like that those players have had to adapt. The one thing I always want from a balance update, I would love it to be more balanced, but I told you for a long, long time, I don't believe that when you redo everything, you're going to end up with better balance. The one thing I want is change and for players to have to adapt. And Starks have had to adapt. Absolutely 100% Starks are in a totally new situation now. And I really root for the ones that have.
Moving into Targaryens, then we spoke about the Manchester Pentos, Illyrio coming up there. Very popular pick. The rest are actually quite healthy. Zarozo and Daxos quite a low pick rate comparatively, and Daenerys Targaryen the Unburnt, because Carlo can't code him on the site. No, she's the least picked, and there are a lot of solo dragons out there. So clearly, people. I mean, people don't rate the like replace attack that she brings that much when they can bring something else, and the whole like 1 point reduction on a dragon but costing 5 points anyway, so you're basically a 4 point NCU with a full cost dragon. Like that whole mechanic is just stupid.
Pointless. Like
Literally pointless. You don't gain or lose points.
you already bring an ability which is worthless without a dragon, so why do you need to like reduce the cost of a dragon but cost 1 point more? Like I mean, I feel like somebody could have just pointed that out. Like again, like what you're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, it is clearly just a bit weird. I don't get why they've done that. Why it's been released like that, it just seems strange. But specifically because it's always the question of, like, you've seen it again today, like, oh, does she reduce all of them by one or only one? Like, I see that question so many times.
You just create ambiguity in the player base, and they're not really sure how it goes.
Now, I know that we've talked a lot about 3 NCUs, but that's because obviously it's a massive talking point of the meta. If it's not Night's Watch, the other talking point of the meta is 3 versus 2 NCUs. So you'll be glad to know that nobody took a 1 NCU or 0 NCU list. Okay? There are a total of 184 lists across teams, and they all took 2 NCUs.
No 4 NCUs though, right?
No, not a single 4 NCU build.
Thank God, because you know, like that was a thing when 3 NCU commanders existed. When you know when it was possible to play Pirate Pre with a 6th zone and 4 NCUs, crazy stuff.
Yeah, 136 3 NCU builds, 2 builds coming in at 48. So call it roughly a quarter of the meta. That is pretty much bang on a quarter of the meta.
It's a 3-to-1 advantage in terms of 3 over 2.
Yep.
I think anybody who said, hey, it's going to be a 2 NCU game now, no.
That's not the way people play. Obviously, we'll see how it all racks up, and we'll take stats on 3 versus 2 NCUs winning. We'll obviously rate them as well based on, obviously, there are more 3 NCUs playing. We'll only look at the mirrors anyway, so, you know, that's where we'll look into it.
Going way back to my travels, my journeys, Liverpool, you know, I played into a 5-2 Drogo list, 2 NCU list. It was the first time I played into 2 in like a while. Do you know what I mean? Like in around our club, like 3 is very, very common, and it scared me at times. You know, like it was powerful, but as the game progressed, I maintained my 3 NCUs, and they became more and more influential as the number of units dwindled, and as the power of those units dwindled, as their ranks go down. The 3 NCUs remain, and as people mentioned earlier, that's its real strength. They're activations that never go away, never get weaker, never diminish their return on the game, whereas on-field units diminish very quickly and just start getting removed. And so as the game stretches on, that 3 NCU advantage just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger.
Definitely. And I've played a couple of games on TTS, and I actually had the opportunity to play a game physically last week when Carlo was off. I got to go down to my local, the club that we now go to at the moment, play against our friend Dan. And
what the fuck?
I know, right? You miss out.
The 1 week I'm not there, you go.
Yeah, Dan just wanted to go down, so you know, sod you anyway, Carlo. Yeah, so I mean, I know, right? And 3 NCUs is definitely the way I believe the game is going. It's how I build my lists. I actually do believe that there are two NCU builds out there that work. Right? It's the same as 1.6. Mm-hmm. Like there were Stark 1.6 builds with 2 NCUs that worked. I believe there are Night's Watch builds with 2 NCUs that work. In fact, I think the most oppressive build in the game is a 2 NCU list. Does that mean 2 NCUs is better? No. That list is not oppressive because it's a 2 NCU list. That list is oppressive because it's Night's Watch and what it gains from that.
I think it's very similar to 1.6. You can point to some factions that can play it, 2 NCUs. I would answer you with they're just the most powerful factions. Therefore, they can get away with the slightly lower efficiency playing it to NCUs. Starks could do it in the past. Now Night's Watch can do it. And I also believe Targs can do it now. But that's because Targs and Night's Watch are already more powerful than everybody else. They can get away with not taking it. And also, they're the ones that have the cheapest other activations. They've got those 3-point Freedmen and they've got those 4-point conscripts. That's why they can get away with it. I wouldn't even say that Lannisters can get away with 2 NCUs. Lannisters are a 3 NCU faction in my mind. They very much are. They're very much played on the board. Even though Joffrey can allow you to control crowns while controlling something else, I still just think that they're a 3 NCU faction for me.
Yep. Now we're looking at the neutral breakdowns here. You'll be glad to know that yes, Free Folk took 0 neutral NCUs. Positive thing, right? It means the stats are working because it means I haven't counted any accidentally. But it is in fact Targaryens leaning the most heavily on neutral NCUs. Night's Watch, Lannister also high up in there. Yes, those are the most picked factions. Baratheons are lagging behind a little bit, but it is realistically Targs that are really, really buying into those neutrals. And you've only got to look at, of the 21 Walder picks, 10 of them appear in Targaryens.
Yeah, that's a specific like tempo play and or combined in with Pirate Pre. Like yep. they're one and the same thing.
They are. To give you an idea of how many Pirate Pre lists there were 11. Not all of the Pirate Pre's had Walder in as well, but the vast majority did, I think.
Yep.
So yeah, there we go. That's NCUs, and that's what it is and where it stands. We will look at attachments, although you can't really read much about attachments, but I've got some interesting statistics as well to go into this to finish us off with. So we see the Watch Captain at the most picked unit or most picked attachment in the game. To nobody's surprise, but Bronn not far behind, and Offal, of course, the commander coming in at number 3, and the Champion of Faith. Veterans are up there, but I mean,
I think the Champion of Faith is good, but I want to see what his win rate is when it all shakes out, because I don't think it'll be as high as those other high picks are.
Yep.
Mormon Veteran, we'll just have to see whether or not she can carry the entire Stark faction on her shoulders, basically. The
interesting stat for the Mormon Veteran you'll notice is the number is at least comparative to a lot more other ones up there at top there, but her list number is way lower. She's posting 16 picks at 9 lists. That's nearly an average of 2 a list. Whereas a lot of the other ones that we see...
She's almost as popular. She's way more popular than loads of other attachments, but there aren't that many Starks, remember, right?
Yeah.
There aren't that many Stark lists. She appears a lot.
She's the highest. I think she's one of the highest rates with a significant number of picks, which says a lot. Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be Shall we see who's not picked?
Yeah, go on. Let's have the sad names.
Look at number of ones. Look at these, by the way. There are a lot of attachments. Of course, these are
Brienne getting a single pick I saw there.
Yeah. But we see, and this is like summing all of them up. Brynden Tully, not picked as a commander, so not pairing. Mira, champions, Swornsword captains, Brynden Tully, unyielding knight. Mage Mormont, still the absolute bane of the Kickstarter edition. Still 0 picks. Always been 0 picks. I've never seen a Mage Mormont in a list and played.
I've never ever seen Mage Mormont hit the table.
The Great John Umber, the attachment variant, the Young Wolf version of Rob, Cyril Farrell, Winterfell Guardians.
There's a lot.
Jaqen, Joffrey, obviously, Preston Grenfield. Oh my god, the drop he has had.
Great.
Yeah. Guard captains, Boros Blunt. Sentinel Enforcer, I thought everyone wanted Taunt. I thought everyone wanted Taunt on their halberdiers. Clegane Butchers, none. Obviously, Night's Watch has got all the commanders, but then you've got Gren, Pippa, Alistair, John, the Lord Snow, the Watch Marshal attachment, none. Free Folks a little bit more understanding. They've got very few lists. Davos, Devon, the Piper
Davos,
captain.
every name.
I know, right? Axel, the attachment Axel, which I don't think anyone even knows exists. Courtney Penrose, the attachment variant there. Exiled Knight Jorah, Belwas, the 1-point attachment, doesn't make it into lists. Pennant Betrayer, Free by the Dragon, the Targaryen version of the Stormcrow Lieutenant. The Warsworn, Theon just not picked at all. and bolting.
I looked today. There's only about 5 or 6 things in the entire game that have never been used in our game, in our list. Like actually had a game submitted to them, and 2 of them are Jorah. That Jorah Exiled Knight, Jorah Penitent Betrayer. Nobody are using them at all. So sad times for Jorah.
Sad times for Jorah. But there's a lot there. Okay, with attachments, you'd expect there to be a lot more 0 picks, especially from the armies that are literally appearing less in the TSL. But some of those names are names that you'd expect to have seen more commonly. I mean, there's not a single skin change. Not a single skin change.
I think the attachment pick rate is a bit higher. Like,
yes.
I do think it is a little bit higher, but not much. It isn't the addition of attachments at all. It isn't just like attachments are viable now. And we're still like, if we go down just a little bit, we're still seeing like Bronn. And then, commanders are in there. But other than that, we're not seeing named characters. They haven't done enough to make a named character feel impactful on the game.
The highest picked named characters after Bronn are Rickon, Osha, obviously, and Vargo, all at 9 picks.
Yeah.
Vargo's doing a really good job of really changing the meta. Right. It's not doing it for me. This number here, so there are a total of 515 attachments. Except that's not actually true, right? Because
how many
there
lists
are
total?
184 lists.
So there's 184 characters. Yeah.
There's actually 331 attachments overall.
Okay.
That means that we see less than an attachment for every 2 units. It's actually less than that. Most units don't have an attachment. Now, some don't. Solos and like Drogon, the Dragons, Jorah, Brondring Knight, Jorah the Explorer, I should say, Gregor, all of these kind of guys can't have attachments.
Makes it feel roughly at about 50% of units bring an attachment with them.
Yeah.
I would say that's up. I would say that's up from where it used to be. I would say most people used to bring 4 units and one of them might have an attachment. Like, be my rough guesstimate. We don't actually have stats on that. We didn't used to keep quite such tight list analysis.
The average spend on attachments. Now, this is taking out the zeros, by the way. I take out the. I actually don't take all of them out. I'm going to do that now. It's 184, isn't it? Take out the costs of the commanders, and we see the average spend on attachments is 1.3. The average spend on units is just under 6 at 5.8. This is average costing across the game. So that means an average unit is costing you, bearing in mind it's about half of the unit, so 0.6 to 0.65, is costing you about 6.5 points. Is the average unit cost, be that a 5-point unit with an attachment, or a 6-point unit, or a 7-point unit. That seems to be the sweet spot at the moment for the meta builds. I don't know if that's gone up or down. I think it's probably.
Yeah. I don't think that it's 6 points though. I think that it's 4 points supporting 7s and 8s. Like that's the power supported by the chaff. It comes out around 6, but I don't think you're best served by putting like 5-6 point units on the board, which is what a lot of people like kind of build their 5-2 list around.
And it's supported by the data here with nearly 100 units picked that were 4 points. Okay then, guys. So there you go. There's like an idea of how much people are spending, the kind of attachments and things that people are going to be looking at. Again, if you've got any questions or anything you want me to dive into with that, feel free to let me know. I will assess that in a bit more detail. We'll look at the activations then overall, and we see. Yeah, you're gonna show me the hashtags because you're not big enough. But we see average activations sitting at 7.26, and the average pseudos sitting at 7.46. So they are having an impact on the meta. Pseudo activations are actually impacting the stats here.
Yeah. I'm gonna take a wild guess that that's mostly in Night's Watch, right? Like,
It's nearly entirely in Night's Watch. Unfortunately, because the individual boasts aren't working, I couldn't tell you. But
okay.
But it's nearly entirely Night's Watch. Just if you purely look at the number of attachments that we see, let's find them. We've got Night's Watch watch captions at 28. We've got Targaryen officers. I will actually go Greyjoy, Victarion, Master of the Iron Captain, the commander. Yes, Master of the Iron Victory is the attachment with Relentless. There's only 3 of him, and the Unsullied officers coming down at like 2, I think. Oh no, there's 7 in total. Fair enough. But that gives what 10 plus whatever the Night's Watch had. 10 plus something stupid.
28.
10 plus 28, isn't it? Yeah, 28. So 38 overall Relentless picks for pseudo activations. It has an impact. It has an impact.
Yeah. I think that the game's being played at 7 and 8. It used to be getting played at 8 and 9, and I say that like, well, no, actually, to be honest, it was being played at 9 and 10, right? So it's come down. It has come down. You would think that would make more people viable, but I don't think it has. Like that was the assumption. That's what I kind of felt would happen. Like everybody can play at 7 now, but I don't think that's necessarily true. Or maybe I'm just stubborn and I'm stuck in the fact that like I am a very, very much an 5 and 3 player. Like that's what I feel comfortable playing with. That's the board coverage that I want. That's the tactics board coverage that I want. That's how I want to cover enough objectives in a game mode that has 5 objectives to be able to like control one side of the board but threaten the other. These are all things that lead me to believing that a 5-3 strategy wins games.
Yep.
I have to say that I haven't played as many 2021 games as some other people, but you know, like I played a tonnage of 1.6 and did very, very well in it. That's what used to do me well. And I haven't seen any reason to want to transition. I was surprised at the pressure that a 5-2 list was able to put me under, but ultimately it was a crushing victory. So you know, like the final result doesn't lie, which was I won the game.
What's interesting for me is that we see there are 2 native 9-point activation lists. 9 activation lists, sorry. Free Folk and Greyjoy. The Free Folk running a bunch of raiders, maybe I think 1 trapper unit, and then some 5-point units and 3 NCUs. The Greyjoy unit, if I remember off the top of my head, was I think 3 bowmen or 2 bowmen and a trapper actually, a bunch of reavers and 3 NCUs, with an assortment of attachments in there. There are these stats obviously are not working fully, but there are a total of 9 pseudo activation lists. And I can tell you that of those 8, all but 1, I think. You got the 2 before. I think 1 of them is not Night's Watch. So the other 5 lists, taking away the 2 and the 1, 5 lists are Night's Watch pseudo activations at 9.
Tara says that 5-3 is hard and it requires you to bring units that are just garbage, awful food. But so again, I'm mostly talking about Lannisters. That's what I've been list building with. That's what I've been theorizing with at the moment. Not true for me because I just bring poor fellows. Like I just build out, and at the moment, every one of my lists just begins with 3 units of poor fellows. Bang, there we go. I would like it to be 2 units of poor fellows and Mountain That Rides, but Mountain That Rides is awful food. And 3 units of poor fellows are one of the most resistant things that I can actually bring to survive a scorpion at infinite range. So, you know, like it ticks both categories, and then I still have enough points to play around that the other 2 units can be pretty powerful. And I can still bring 3 NCUs. So that is where my Lannister list building is at the moment. It's 3 poor fellows plus whatever flavor of damage that I'm trying to bring, be that panic based or, you know, more direct. I I played 2 games against Targaryens. I played against the Drogo list, 5-2. A really close game that then just like on some dice rolls swung massively in my favor, and as Song of Ice and Fire does, then just like snowballed into a crushing victory, even though it was right on the knife edge. Really great game. And then I got thoroughly, utterly spanked by Mother of Dragons. And I've since been trying to think, like, as soon as I saw that he had Mother Dragons in his pairing, I knew that, like, oh God, I don't have any lists that can deal with MOD. Like, you know, I just brought some lists that I could fit in my case across the country. And I was like, man, I do not have anything ready for MOD. And I've been really theorizing what would help ever since. So I was really pleased to play and lose that game. It was very enlightening. I haven't played Mother of Dragons for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, I guess the sad thing is that we talk about activations. We talk about kind of like where we're at with the number of things in each list. We can actually see that there are only a total of 4 lists, which being 6 on-field activations. There are a total of 93 lists that run 5 on-field activations. This is telling you that a lot of people, about half of the lists, are trying to run some form of 5-2 or 5-3 strategy. The vast majority are trying to go for 5-3s. There are a lot, I say this without being horrible, there are a lot of 4 activations.
For combat units?
For combat units.
Yeah.
Half of the game, half of the lists we see in the entire TSL got 4 combat units on the field.
I'm not entirely against it. I prefer 4 and 3 to 5 and 2, particularly right now. If none of them are solos, if none of them are particularly weak, I prefer a 4-3 myself. I was 3 NCU before it was cool. Yeah, I mean, like I've since day one when I played this game, I was like, oh my God, I love the tactics board. And I just put as many NCUs. Like I was like, bring more NCUs. This is great. And I've never been able to break that mentality. I always these days, since playing at more competitive TTS online and seeing those advantages and really analyzing the game more, I really, really try to get myself to a 5-3, not a 4-3. But I'm more comfortable at 4-3 myself than a 5-2. But I know a lot more people like the 5-2. It's not my choice, though.
Yeah. I'm going to surprise you, though. Let's make this statistic here. There are 183 lists, sorry, with 4 combat units. There are 184 lists in the tournament.
So there's somebody with 3 units. Is it does it have like crossbows with a captain, somebody with a command, like veterans with a commander, and 3 NCUs? So it's a almost, so what's that? That's a 3-3, but it's actually a pseudo 5-3. Is it, that would be my guess.
It's, get this, Theo's John list, Ranger Hunters with John, Ranger Hunters with a Hardened Ranger, Ranger Hunters with a Watch Captain, Jaw, Jack and Warren.
That's not what I expected.
3 Ranger Hunters, 1 with the Commander, 1 with a Hardened Ranger, and a Watch Captain, and then running 3 NCUs, including Corrin.
So it's a pseudo 4-3.
It literally has 12 wounds on the board with a small amount of healing in the base deck. He doesn't even run Amon. He's running 36 wounds in his list And I think
Hyper aggressive.
I think he gains 2 wounds from each use of Stan United Brothers on John's unit, meaning his entire list runs a grand total of 40 wounds. It's crazy, man.
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah.
Good luck.
I think he's gonna. I think you know what. I don't think it's an absolutely terrible build. I don't think it's good though. But hey, we'll see how it goes.
Sam Geddes Smith knows that is absolute Ranger danger. He is
danger.
spot on. That list is now Ranger danger.
Right then. So as usual, guys, we will be bringing you all of the round data as well from the tournament. There's loads of bits and we'll be bringing you all this round data as well as the game goes on. I've got all the rounds set up, ready to be put input, data to be calculated. So we'll see how all of that comes out in the wash. It should be fairly interesting to see how it comes out. I'll be putting the games in. I'm gonna have to make it a bit better, and we'll see how everything kind of progresses from there. If there's anything else that people want me to dive into and try and get some like a deeper dive on the stats, please let me know. Obviously, we'll be looking at win rates and things like that as the time progresses. And like we did with the NRG event, we'll also be assigning what did we call it originally? Did we call it
like
meta
impact factor, I think.
Yeah, impact meta or meta impact or impact factor. We will be looking at impact factor as well, and we'll see where that comes out. Hint, hint.
For once, Mickey's using the inverted we, which is he'll do the work and I'll just sit and talk. Whereas normally he says we and he means I'll do the work. But for once, this is Mickey will do the work. So all praise to Mickey and his manual spreadsheet, because I would not be asked.
This was awful. No joke. Writing out like all of these lists and going through all of these links. Like I literally copied out by hand 184, and I've got it set up so it's a lot easier than it like seems at first, because you can use drop down lists, but none of them working on the totals one. But they work on the individual divisions. My God, love of God, please. No desire to do that again. I might do it anyway. If anyone wants to help out with that, just let me know. I can share this data. Like, this isn't secretive data. Sure, like, we're the ones analyzing it. We're the ones, like, collating it and things like that. But it's not secretive. I am more than happy to share this with anyone who wants it shared. I might even put it as a link in the NRG Discord, or even upload the spreadsheets as downloadable files from the TSL Discord that you can then download, play around with the data yourself. Just have a little go at it. I definitely have built this poorly, so you guys saying, look, do this better, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, so there we go, the TSL. Looking forward to it myself, playing in a team obviously with Van Stannis and Kai. We're gonna have a good fun, even if not anything else. And yeah, so is that the end of the episode? Of course not. Of course that's not the end of the episode. We wouldn't leave you there, would we? No. We're talking about tournaments, right? My question to you, Carlo, is the TSL the first tournament of 2021?
Don't think so.
No, it isn't. It is not the first tournament of 2021. There has been a tournament already. Our good friend Vlad, who was on last week, was literally at a tournament over the weekend. Walla Mogulis ran by, I couldn't tell you, it's a French tournament, but it's one run over there, and a load of people entered, and if you were to guess what won the tournament, what would you say?
I already looked. Isn't it neutrals?
It is neutrals. Yeah.
Doubt on that. I mean, see, I don't know. I don't want to labour the point. This is why it's really frustrating. It'd be super interesting to know more about that tournament, but we can't. We don't. We don't
know more about it.
It's just it's wasted information. I really be super interesting to know what lists won, how they were made, what people were running, what it beat. I had huge doubts about all of the finishing positions. Like, they did not look like anything that good players would have predicted.
Yeah. I mean, just to run you down the top 10, we had neutrals, Free Folk, Baratheon, Decipher playing Baratheon, Nubman playing Targaryen, another Targaryen. We have our first Night's Watch by a guy called Wolferus. Friend from show last week, Vlad, came in at number 7 with his Lannisters. Titus was in the first NRG event, interviewed him for Baratheons. He's still playing his Baratheons and came in at number 8. Walou, Lannisters, number 9. Chabalou, big French player on a lot of the online stuff, number 10. Lannisters, number 11. Like, the 2 bottom players in the event were Night's Watch.
Yeah. And
I have no idea.
The problem is that we have no way to collate like how powerful the players are, like how good they are versus like what's important. I don't know. It just let's not talk about it. It makes me sad, you know. It makes me most sad because I might have to admit that neutrals are a faction. Like they won a goddamn tournament. Like,
yeah, I know, right? I'm sorry, I'm just counting, so keep it going.
Was it like the only neutral entry?
50, 51, 52. Was it the only neutral entry? I think it was. Yeah, it was the only neutral entry. It would be great if we had the stats. It would be great to know the games that happened. I will say, this is free public information. Here's the lists. We've got the lists from the event. Yeah, all of the lists are available from the event, so it is possible to go back through and look at what was run. Okay. I don't know. You can't really see the games that were played in the game modes. You can't get a huge assessment of where the wins were, but the event still has the lists available. So guys, if you're not on the French Discord, I'll send you a link if you want to have a look through it. I'm sure they won't mind. There is lists there that you can go and look at and have a little feast on. If we want to look at the winning lists, again, we know it wasn't on stats, but it's still a tournament nonetheless. Let's see if they're even on here. I don't actually know if they are. His lists in particular, which is interesting if they're not, isn't it? A lot about them. I can't see them. Can't see the lists up there for the neutral player.
Can't find the neutrals.
Yeah, which is interesting for Ricer. But I'm sure Ricer is actually quite a common name on the main Discord. I'm sure if you asked him what list he ran, see, according to this, he was running Lannisters.
Right, so it's actually not true.
Yeah.
Neutrals didn't actually win. And
Gregor, Clegane, Warrior, Sons, Poor Fellows, Halberdiers, Knights of Castle Rock.
I don't know. This is why I don't. Yeah. This is why I don't trust
other sides.
The hearsay of it.
Yeah. So there, from what I can tell, this is the event, and it wasn't even neutrals that won it. There you go. That's my bad information. There you go. But
yeah. No, I read the same information. Yeah.
This is a much better site for it because it tells you everything when the tournament things work. So tournaments are being run though. There have been multiple tournaments in France. So I mean, you know, that is big. And they are in-person tournaments. Are bad for calling that one, clearly. So as things are going, we see Night's Watch number 60 points, nearly 61 points. A lot of people have been talking about ELO.
This is a thing that happened while I was away, right? Like, where did this come from? When did it become 60,000? People started talking about, like, this has got 100 million points. And I'm like, it's got a decimal fucking point. Yeah, it's 60.0.
You've got to remember that on the continent, a point doesn't actually mean a decimal point. Sometimes it's used as demarcation for thousands.
But nothing has changed since the old version of the site. Nothing at all. nobody used to think it was 60,000. All right, it's 60. And just to put that into perspective, it's roughly the same difference between two players having a difference of 60 ranking, right?
Yep.
So if you're 1500 and they're 1560, it's the same as your faction being 0 and theirs being 60.
Yep.
You know, just to it makes things really, really simple. It's not 60,000, it's 60 in numbers. But yes, Night's Watch are starting to really establish themselves and pull away. Othos particularly is like significantly plus 100 now, I think.
Yep.
So yeah, right.
Yep.
So
so there we go. I mean, they're pulling away. Obviously we'll be able to give you better in-depth stats, but Othel's clearly pulling away as the most ridiculous commander. And if you want to, go and try and prove if you can win games, it's people like Andrew Estamont, Great John Umber, Stannis, Renly, Eddard, those kind of people you want to be running to try and win games with. So yeah, it's the way I've been describing it. Obviously, Carlo's been off for a week, and a lot of players have been asking about the ELO, been trying to explain the ELO system, how it works. As things currently are trending, I think it would be fairly reasonable, Carlo, to say that we're expecting Othel to get to probably a ranking of about 150 and to probably plateau at roughly that level at this moment in time.
I think he's worse. I think he might be a 200.
He might get there. He's slowed down a lot in the last kind of couple of days.
Yeah.
Mind you saying that he was at 40 points in the end of last week. So
yeah.
Night's Watch were. We'll see. We'll see how the tournament obviously shapes up and how that all comes about in the end. We'll have to see. We'll definitely have to see. Say about it really isn't great. Everything else is currently obviously this is fucking. Everything else is obviously already switched off, but Carlo, you are going to be turning some of these things back on this week, I believe.
Hopefully, yeah. Tournaments should be back as soon as possible.
Yep, tournaments back up. Is that later this week, do you reckon? Once you've done some more stuff with it. We'll get the unit ELOs, and when are we expecting profiles and things to come back as well? Just so people can then go and look at game histories and things.
Well, that won't start until after tournaments, so we'll see. That would definitely be the week after, or maybe even a while later. You know, like, tournaments have taken a huge amount of time, and it's unfortunate that they're such a requirement for the community. Because it doesn't, it brings in the data, but it doesn't do the interesting stuff with the data, in my opinion. So the interesting stuff has to wait until afterwards.
Yeah. We're going to be making more of a conscious effort this season as well, 2021, to do more analysis on the data as well. We talk about a lot of what's going on and the news and things like that, which we'll be keeping up with that in Tourney Ground, but we're going to try and deep dive into why things are happening. And, every now and then we're going to be doing deep dives into, right, what's this going to happen? And I think one of the first deep dives that I want to do specifically, which will take up at least part of next episode, be some of the questions there. So the valuable keywords and things. Maybe look at Tywin lists. And for Lockerbie, I know he wants to know about terrain and the terrain impacts of the new update. Okay then, guys, we will leave it there for today. It's been about 3 hours. It's been a relatively long one, but thanks for joining us yet again. Great viewership as always, guys, and I know you guys appreciate it. So we will catch you next week, where we hope you have many, many more games to play. And have a good time.
Laters.